I'm just there.
Tom, how are you doing, sir? You're knee deep in that advice. How you doing? I'll stop what you're doing. Good to see you. How are you? They are?
Across the aisle.
Good to see you.
So did you guys go out on that island there?
Yeah, Castaway Cay. That was awesome. All it takes is money. Have your own island. That was very nice. The girls loved it. Yeah, yeah. Absolutely.
But Doreen is here, so we can start.
I don't know yet. I have to go next meeting and find out.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean,
Yes.
no, I think I
Yes, water projects and
Yeah. Janet's out there for me.
We're going to have some.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
We ready? Well, good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Good morning.
This is our second get-together for Forward Pinellas and PSTA. And we will start with introductions. And I'm Jim Kennedy, and I have the privilege of being the chair of Forward Pinellas. And Darden.
Good morning, everyone. I'm the chair of PSTA, and I sit on MPO, and I'm very much looking forward to this meeting. This is a really important part of PSTA and MPO's collaboration and partnership, and we're talking about some important things today.
And if we can do introductions, and start with Commissioner Welch.
Good morning, Ken Welch, County Commission, and for another 60 days, PSTA member. Term limits for PSTA.
Good morning, Brian Scott, PSTA board member and also a member of the local coordinator.
Tom Shelley, Beller, Commissioner, and MPO member.
Bill Johnson, Vice Mayor, City of Clearwater, past Chairman of PSTA.
Cliff Mers, Commissioner, City of Safety Harbor, Forward Pinellas, MPO.
Lisa Little Bowman, St. City Council member and PSTA board.
Samantha Fenger, City of Largo Commission and PSTA board member.
Dave Eggers, Pinellas County Commissioner. I'm on the MPO and the PSTA.
Mark Jackson, I'm Commissioner of the PSTA.
Marie Patel, City Board Council and MPO board.
Cookie Kennedy, City of Long Beach, MPO board Pinellas, and representing all 10 beach communities.
Doug Beavis, the mayor of the City of Oldsmar, PSTA board member.
Morning, I'm Vic Lanton, Forward Pinellas.
Good morning, Brad Miller, CEO of PSTA. Welcome to PSTA.
I'm Alan Zimmer, General Counsel for PSTA.
And introductions as you come in?
Oh, hello, I'm Jill Moore, Pinellas County Commissioner.
Oh, hello.
She knows how to make an entrance.
Sandra Bradbury, City of Pinellas Park.
And we want to go around the outside of the room also? Why don't we start in the far corner?
Rachel Garofalo, PSTA.
And please speak up so everybody can hear you.
Rachel Garofalo, PSTA.
Clarissa Atfeld, PSTA.
Bob Lasher, PSTA.
Chelsea Favreau, Board of Health Staff. Cassandra Borchers, PSTA.
Lynn Gallia, POT.
Brian Baby, Department of Transportation.
Simpson, City Safety Transportation.
Cindy Rapids, PSTA.
Al Martellano for
Zach Ross?
Camille Perez, Commissioner Long's office.
Start in the front row.
Zach Hoover, RSA Consulting. Edward Briggs, RSA Consulting.
Steve Lasky, for Pinellas.
Danny Taylor, City of Pinellas Park.
Alicia Parinella, for Pinellas Staff.
Andrew Covington, Forward Pinellas.
Chelsea Hardy, for Pinellas General Counsel.
Rodney Chapman, Board of Health.
Claire Hirsch, for Pinellas Staff.
Rick Feliciano, FPOT. Bird, Board of Health Staff.
Sarah Ward, Board of Pinellas Staff.
Did we get everyone?
Melissa Costick, PSTA.
Hog Island, City Safety Transportation.
And good morning, and thank everybody for attending. And the first item we have on our agenda is a review of the January 22nd, 2016 work session and follow-up activities. And Rick Blanton, our Executive Director for MPO, or Forward Pinellas, will take us through that.
Okay, well, good morning, everybody, and thanks for being here today. I just had a very quick summary. I know it's been about 6 months, but this is the second of 2 meetings we've had this year, and I think it was interesting. This is the second of 2 meetings that we've had as a joint board in probably 2 decades. So I wanted to just touch on a few things. We summarized the comments that you gave. You had a little worksheet at your last workshop, and that worksheet had a few open-ended questions, and so I went through and looked at all the notes, and there were about 4 things where we had some consistency of comments. This isn't a summary of all the comments, but I just thought that these were some things where there seemed to be some general agreement. We asked, what can PSTA do for the county? What can the MPO do for PSTA? How can we work together? There were a number of questions that you all responded to. And one thing that stood out that I think we had 5 or 6 or 7 responses to was one of the key critical unmet needs for transit service in Pinellas County was more frequent routes and later service into the evening and more frequency of service. The second bullet here bears a little bit of more discussion because it covered a lot of topics. I pulled it down into better communication and collaboration. That included working jointly with our stakeholder agencies, with our partners, working together on community engagement, better dialogue with citizens of Pinellas County, with the businesses of Pinellas County, to talk about not only the needs for transit service, but the needs for the community in terms of economic development and the role transportation and transit service plays in economic development. Better communication between our boards. There was a lot of commentary on those sheets about this is the first of a series of meetings we need to be having together. This is a series of things that we want to be doing to work better together. And when I use the word collaboration, several of you said collaboration could mean funding collaboration. It could be jointly developing projects. It could be working on corridor planning and service planning together. It could be working on land use and serving, making sure that transit supports economic development and land use changes in Pinellas County. And collaboration also meant with regional partners. So there was a lot captured in that second bullet point. The third one, which probably there were 4 or 5 comments related to that, was that we need to do a better job of linking our downtowns in Pinellas County and across the bay in Tampa. And there was some nuance there because some of that related to where there are networks that support transportation, where there's the first mile, last mile opportunities exist in our downtowns because we have generally good walking and good pedestrian environments, good bicycling networks, and an array of services that are available. So connecting those downtowns. And I think there was some commentary also that the downtowns were the economic drivers in a lot of ways of where we're going to go in the future in this county. And then the last bullet point was there was agreement on the need to develop more premium service in Pinellas County, that we need to move beyond the basic fixed route service to have another layer of service on top of that caters towards regional transportation, that caters towards connecting people to employment destinations, providing more direct, limited stop, preferential treatment. And I wanted to stop there and see if anybody recalls anything differently or if anybody wants to talk about any of those points of what I think were shared consensus. Does that resonate with everybody? Seem pretty consistent? Anything you feel is missing? Everybody got crystal clear memories of what happened 6 months ago. Okay, so the second half of this is just a little bit of how we've been working together at a staff level since your workshop. And some of this has taken place prior to that, but I just wanted to talk about a few things we've been doing. We initiated monthly coordination meetings not long after the workshop and have been meeting pretty regularly between our staff and PSTA staff and the Florida Department of Transportation. And they aren't meetings around a particular project. They're just meetings to what are we working on, what's next, what's coming up, what are some issues. And I know we've spent a lot of time talking about the changes in service in the Dunedin area in terms of the Jolly Trolley and how that Route 66 we're going to be working together so that we were working in partnership on understanding those kinds of service changes. We've been talking about different corridor planning activities that are coming up, whether they're led by FDOT or they're led by Forward Pinellas, or they're things that are in the Path Forward plan for PSTA. And those coordination meetings, I think, have really helped us have a better dialogue of how we want to move forward as a joint planning environment between the two organizations. We've also been working on scoping and working on specific projects, project engagement activities. We are part of the stakeholders group for the Central Avenue BRT, for the Downtown St. Pete Circulator projects, and PSTA is working with us as a stakeholder organization on our transfer area analysis, where we're looking at all the different connecting points for PSTA routes to see how can we ensure that we have a more supportive land use pattern and that those transfer locations are in places that really will maximize ridership over time. We are also working together on the selection of the consultant for the Tampa Bay Premium Transit Feasibility Study being led by Hillsborough Area Transit and funded by the Florida Department of Transportation. And that consultant selection occurred over the last couple of weeks, and I think we now have a consultant ready to move forward on that. And so that project will get started. And you may recall that that is a study to look at the feasibility of how we connect our region better, looking at the Howard Franklin corridor, looking at the Gandy corridor, looking at the CSX tracks, looking at all ranges of opportunity to advance one or more local regional preferences that we can support and go after federal funding. And then finally, we've participated in a series of workshops and committees together. Our listening sessions were all well attended by PSTA staff. We've been participating in PSTA's community meetings on service changes, and I think that understanding is real helpful. And Sarah and others who've been here before me can speak to if this is a higher level of coordination than in the past, but I think it's just something that I feel very positive about, and I think Cassandra and Brad would agree that it's working well. Are there any questions about how we've been working together from any of the board members here? Okay, all right, we'll just keep going then. So today what we're asking you to do is provide us with some policy guidance, because over the next couple of months we are going to be advancing our annual transportation priorities to the Florida Department of Transportation. And in August, we are going to be taking those recommended priorities back to our advisory committees, our Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee, our Citizens Advisory Committee, and our Technical Coordinating Committee. And they will be developing some recommendations to take to the Forward Pinellas board in September. And in September, the board then transmits its annual list of priorities to FDOT. Now, there's a cyclical nature to MPOs. We are on a pretty consistent process, and FDOT will then prepare a draft tentative work program based on those priorities and report back to us by December, generally, of how they're putting those priorities into the draft work program. And then that work program gets finalized in July of every year. So we just now have a new work program that we're working from. Now, that's this year's process. But over the next 2 years, we're going to be evolving that process even further. So what I would say is we're kind of in an interim period right now as we transition, because several years ago, about 3 years ago, MAP 21 was the new federal transportation law at the time. We now have a newer one called the FAST Act, which is a 5-year transportation funding program. And it requires that we have a performance-based, outcome-driven planning process. And what's different about that, and you've probably heard me say this, is that for everything we put into our transportation improvement program, that annual list of priority projects and the work program that DOT develops are all based on the transportation improvement program. We have to be able to demonstrate that it's helping achieve targets that we set. And who can tell me what a target is? I'm going to put you on the spot. Doreen?
I actually have a question to
Okay.
MPO advisory committee work sessions that we're going to have in August and then September's full board. We need to have all those together and buttoned up for the October Beach MPOAC as part of that agenda. Is that correct? Or not?
It's not really so much tied into the MPOAC, but we'll report out at the MPOAC, right? Yeah, that's more of a statewide of all the MPOs getting together. So who can tell me what a target is? What do you think a target is? Because we're going to ask you to help set some targets today, maybe.
Performance measurement?
Yeah, it's performance measurement, a calculated goal. It's. I think those are right. We have to identify performance measures, and then we have to say, okay, now that we know what we're measuring, what do we want to get to? What's the outcome that we want to achieve? So a target might be, let's just pick ridership, for example. We might have a target of growing ridership by 10% over the next year. That would be a target. Or having a certain amount of express bus service or premium transit service in the next 5 years. Going from 0 premium transit service to, say, 2 routes that are premium transit service, something like that. That would be a target that we could work toward. And if we put something in our TIP, our Transportation Improvement Program, we need to be able to tell the Florida Department of Transportation and the Federal Highway Administration in our certification that this is a project that is moving us towards that target. That applies to congestion, how we're reducing congestion. What are our projects that we're advancing that might reduce congestion? So Chelsea Favreau of our staff is going to get into this a little bit more in a minute, but I just wanted to emphasize that because this is probably our best opportunity for you all to help us at a high policy level think about what those performance measures and targets that we want to look at for continued collaboration between our board and PSTA. Commissioner Long.
Doesn't connectivity have to be in there at some level?
I think it does. I think connectivity would be a great target for us to aspire to. We're actually recommending, and Chelsea will get into this in a moment, a prioritization process that favors connectivity, closing of gaps, connecting places, connecting destinations. And to me, that's a mode-neutral way of thinking about transportation.
I was more thinking about connecting regionally.
Absolutely. Well, you connect on different scales. So we connect within a downtown, we connect within a corridor, we connect at a regional scale. We connect countywide. Absolutely. Any other questions on this slide?
I do have one. We've always had goals, increased ridership as an example. Are you saying now we need more, quantified goals as a requirement? And what caused this change?
The federal transportation law caused this change, which I think is actually a good thing. I think it's probably one of the biggest breakthroughs in transportation planning we've had in the last 10 or 15 years, since ICE-T in 1991. And it's one thing to have those goals. But the nuance that I'm trying to stress is that now, and this doesn't apply to PSTA unless you take PSTA as part of the MPO, which I do, but PSTA is not under the same requirement that an MPO is. We have to demonstrate in the projects that we advance that not only are we looking at those goals, but that we have a target that we're trying to achieve. And what defines success, I think, is the question. You'll see that question come up.
And this is under the, what you call it, FAST Act.
FAST Act, yes.
Thank you.
Which is Fixing America's Surface Transportation.
I will not remember that.
I just like the word fixing because I'm from the South. Okay, so I'm going to walk you through some of the corridor studies because I think this may set a framework for how we continue to collaborate as the two organizations. And to me, corridor planning is the essence of how we link land use and transportation together and how different modes work in concert in tandem. So I'm just going to walk you through the corridor studies that we have right now, either ongoing or about to happen. And these are corridor planning studies that primarily involve land use and transportation. So I'm not going to give you an exhaustive list of everything. So let's start with the one that our board just approved this past July at our board meeting, the State Road 60 Implementation Strategy. This is a corridor study that combines PSTA's highest legislative priority, which is the State Road 60 Express from Tampa International Airport to Clearwater Beach, with a dire need to look at how we move people along the State Road 60 Gulf to Bay corridor through Clearwater. And this is a multimodal strategy to really look at economic growth and redevelopment. Our corridor study limits Drew Street on the north, Druid Road on the south. And while the study area does go from TIA and West Shore over to Clearwater Beach, really the focus from the Forward Pinellas staff and land use and transportation is really from the end of the Courtney Campbell Causeway over to Clearwater Beach, to the roundabout essentially in Clearwater Beach. And we're going to be looking at short and long-term strategies. So a short-term strategy might be, is there a pilot project that we can try during spring break, peak season next year, to give people additional options for getting across the bridge? A longer-term strategy might be, is there a busway that we could construct to give preferential treatment for transit vehicles so that people can park on the mainland side in the downtown area and then connect over? Cable-propelled transit would be addressed as part of this as we coordinated with the City of Clearwater and their Bluffs area, Marina area master planning activities. Potential transit signal priority. We would love to have the County Traffic Engineering Department look at where can we test a transit signal priority project for PSTA buses to have the opportunity to have lengthen the green time as they approach a traffic signal to get through that intersection and stay on time. Anything that can give a little bit of priority in a congested and constrained corridor could be beneficial. Of course, we want to do that and make sure it's balanced and doesn't create undue delays for everybody. But if we can make that work, this might be a good candidate for that. Any questions about State Road 60? Okay, we can come back to any of these. The next study I want to highlight is one that's being led by the Florida Department of Transportation. It's the alternate US 19 corridor study. And in transportation planning, everything is deja vu all over again. I did this study in 1993, something like that, 1992. So 30 years ago, it's time to look at it again. This is a constrained corridor for the most part. We're not really looking at, certainly for the northern section, widening and adding capacity. But there are some operational strategies that can be looked at on this corridor. What we're pledging to do is to bring all the local governments together, and you can see there's Seminole, Largo, Dunedin, Tarpon Springs, the county, unincorporated county, particularly in the Palm Harbor area, St. Petersburg, a whole bunch of local governments along here. And I think of this as part of our enhancing beach community access, because you've got to cross Alt 19 or travel along Alt 19 in part to get to the beach communities. And our pledge is to bring those local governments together to really look at where are the areas of density, intensity, redevelopment, and that will, I believe, drive where we focus on improving crossing opportunities, in where bus stops should be located, what kind of treatments we want at those stops, where developers may be asked to participate in making those stops better and making those crossings better and connecting on their property. I think we have an opportunity through the study to look at a potential lane conversion in the Seminole and Missouri corridors, in Clearwater and Largo, and in the city of Seminole. There's a lot of capacity out there. It may not be feasible, but we'll look at it and see if there's an opportunity for maybe a dedicated bus facility in there, or a bus bike shared facility. So that's something that I think we need to examine. And maybe again here, another ITS, transit signal priority treatment for the Alt-19 corridor, particularly coming out of Pasco County south. There's a lot of congestion on that 2-lane and in part 4-lane section, and maybe there's some things that can be done from a signal standpoint to make that work better. Any questions about this? Yes.
Just to refresh my memory, on the PD&E study, that's funded, and the consultant has been selected working on that. Where are we in the project timeline?
I'm not sure if FDOT can answer that. I'm not sure if you've initiated work with the consultant yet. I know you have a scope, and a bunch of consultants have been meeting with us. So I know there's some folks who are gearing up for it. Not selected yet? Okay. But that's been advanced. We requested that project be moved up a year, and DOT accommodated that request. So it'll get started sometime this fiscal year.
It's funded though, right, for this year?
It's funded. Most studies are funded.
Commissioner Eggers, did you have a question?
Kind of a little humor. Are we going to use as a tool up and down there the Welch roundabout?
It's the Eggers roundabout.
I heard it was the Latvala roundabout.
No doubt.
Thank you. In the north part on this study, you mentioned at the very top of when you started talking about this, not a lot of places where we can expand lanes or make wider, but the study will look at capacity, right?
It will.
There's a long stretch. Obviously, I'm focused on Denby North, but there's a long stretch that has. It used to be 2 lanes going both directions, so it was 4 lanes across.
Right.
And then it got converted, I think, and probably when you look at it, to having 1 lane each way and a middle turn lane. And there had been a consulting company before MPO, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, might have been URS or somebody, that had said they thought it should go back to the 4 lanes from a capacity standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Will that type of thing be looked at?
It will. It will. Absolutely it will. Commissioner Seal.
This is not really relevant, but it is. While we're examining the Seminole, Missouri, can we agree on 1 name so that we don't have multiple names on the corners? I've kept my naming memo for some time now, and it might also be an opportunity to relook at that at the same time.
That's a good suggestion. Yeah, I think it is relevant.
To our tourists.
It does.
And
it's
confusing to people who live here. It can be confusing to people who live here. Yeah, that's what that's.
Commissioner, isn't it a number? Isn't it a state road number?
It is.
It's all US 19 is how I always refer to it.
But down in the Seminole, was it all 19 back in the day? Because it used to be, back in the day, it was some number, I thought.
There probably is a number associated with it, but I just know it is all 19. That's the quiz for, can DOT, that's a quiz. We'll try to see what in history it might have been. Yeah. Commissioner, 595, that's right. Thanks, Brian. Yeah, 595. So Commissioner Welch had a question.
What's the planning window? What scope of time is FDOT looking at for this? I mean, is it a 30-year, 50-year?
That's a really good question. I mean, Brian or Ming, can you answer the sort of the horizon of this PD&E?
I think at this point we're probably looking at 2040.
And the reason I ask that is, as Alt-19 hugs the shore, how are you looking at sea level rise? Is that part of it? Well, if you're talking 30, 40 years,
perhaps we can mention it to a consulting team and see if there's any reasons what to look at, perhaps that be part of the scope.
Because I wouldn't want the Eggers Roundabout to be below sea level. But how high is in Dunedin? How high above sea level is that section that hugs the shore? Do y'all know offhand?
The Edgewater area, all between sea rise, sea level.
Don't know. But it's real darn close. When we have a good strong rain, it floods. And we've been actually reaching out to FDOT, so we get an opportunity here. There's some kind of a drainage thing that FDOT has for the road, and since we did millions of dollars of stormwater renovations on the roads around it, it doesn't need this drain. But what happens is the water actually backs up from the ocean or the Gulf and comes onto the street. And so there needs to be something fixed on whatever that drain, and I'm probably not using the right word to keep it from flooding, but it is very, very close.
To your point, there was some time ago, there was some discussion about even moving all 19.
Oh, that was
right, County Road. Is that, I don't remember where it was being moved to or discussed. Not moved, but discussed.
Right.
Incorrect by the link that I just looked up, Commissioner, it's 30 feet. Sea level rise is 30 feet in that, on all 19.
30? Well, that seems like, although it's not quite that high, but
Yeah.
I would say it was closer to 10.
I think it said that.
30 feet? No, it says it.
Is that the predicted sea level? I'm not.
No, that is the zip code within that neighborhood, and the elevations average are between 25 and 30 feet.
I would say
in that location.
When you get over to Douglas, it's probably up to about 25 feet to Douglas, but not on all. Can't imagine.
Yeah.
This includes all 19.
Yeah, maybe that might be an average too.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what this is.
No, that's not accurate.
It's an average.
Yeah.
What?
It's an average.
Yeah, if it's 30 feet, we don't have to worry about the rise.
It's not 30 feet. There's no way.
I agree.
We'll tell you what, we'll work with DOT, and we'll make sure that that's at least addressed as best we can.
I know the county at one point, I think certainly the Regional Planning Council has maps projecting different scenarios for sea level rise.
Right.
They're new ones, right?
Yeah, they're being updated all the time.
They are, and I know that there is some funding that's looking at that now at the county level. So we'll coordinate with who we need to, and if DOT is not prepared to incorporate that in a big way in the scope, that's something we can bring back and see if there's another way to get at that as part of this. A couple other things I want to mention, and Brad can certainly address this when he gets up to speak, but this is a key corridor that's identified in PSTA's path forward. This is the Route 18 runs up a lot of this for the southern section that connects into downtown Clearwater, and then certainly there's good transit service going north. This is also a corridor that just from a connectivity standpoint, when we talked with the city of Largo, I asked them what they were looking at for this corridor, and the quick response I got from staff was, oh, that's a BRT corridor. So I know our cities are thinking about this as part of their redevelopment efforts. So that's why I really want to get the cities engaged to help inform and guide this project. Yes, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry to interject this right here, but I don't want to get too far away from it. That comment that Ming Gao made about focusing on 2040, those dates really trouble me. I don't know if they bother anybody else, but the world is moving so fast right now as it relates to transportation and how technology is advancing transportation options. And I think at a very basic somewhere, and I'm not exactly sure how, but there has to be some effort by the state and the federal government to rethink how they do these kind of things that don't entail 20 or 30 years out. Because I don't think we can sit here today and know what it's going to be like 20 or 30 years from now, as fast as everything is changing.
Well,
I mean, does that bother anybody else? I don't
You're
know.
right about that.
What?
I think you're right about that. I will say that we have to have a 2040 horizon year. It ties in with the long-range plan. It makes everything consistent. But it doesn't mean that the solutions we're going to look at are all 2040. We will be looking at solutions that will be 1, 2, 5 years out as we can make sure they're programmed and funded. But for major projects, the best we're looking at is probably 5 to 7 years out. But for operational things and for safety projects, those could be done much quicker. So we won't just focus on 2040 as an outcome, but I think to be consistent with our adopted long-range plan, we have to look at 2040. And from sea level rise standpoint, 2040 makes sense. But your point's well taken. We have to be a lot more nimble in this day and age than maybe we had to be 10, 15, 20 years ago. Any other comments? Okay, the next one up here is US 19, and this has been studied a lot, and we're continuing to work on this. As you know, it's one of our 3 spotlight emphasis areas, looking at the Pasco County line all the way down to the Skyway Marina District in St. Petersburg. And I highlight this because I wanted to just let you know there are a couple of things that are ongoing. First, you're aware that FDOT is doing the design and will be moving into construction for a few of the interchanges on the north. So we'll be working very closely with DOT, and I've gotten their commitment that they will keep us very well apprised of how that design is moving forward so that we can weigh in and provide input on the design and ensure that it accommodates pedestrians, bicyclists, transit. For the northern section, we're working with Pinellas County Planning Department now to have a consultant help us with an economic and market analysis looking at land use, potential land use patterns or changes in that area to maybe have more of an employment-based focus in that area. We're seeing more residential development occur in that corridor to make sure our land use fits with the transportation investments that are being made in that area. The city of Clearwater came and met with us the other day at a staff level to say they are now moving forward with their land development standards for their activity center development in the Drew Street countryside area. And for much of that, over the next, say, 4 to 6 months, they're going to be asking for our support in reinforcing the goals of the countywide land use plan that supports more intense development in the US 19 corridor. It is a designated multimodal corridor. It is an activity center. And we've been working with FDOT on a safety study and with PSTA on access to transit from a pedestrian standpoint along that corridor. And DOT is working to build in some underpasses and overpasses along that corridor to improve safety and access. We are also going to be identifying a premium transit concept that would work in that corridor because that's long been a priority of PSTA, and just to see how operationally that would work, what kind of service parameters it would have, how it would access land development activities along that and fit into the redevelopment plans that are being looked at. From the southern section, the Skyway Marina District Plan, we want to support that. There's a lot of road capacity out there, a lot of asphalt. It's not all needed like it may have once been. So is there a potential for repurposing some of the laneage that's out there in the southern section? And how would that connect up into the central plaza area, up north into the employment centers in St. Petersburg? How does that connect into the BRT that would go east-west along 1st and 1st in St. Petersburg? And just really, how do we bring more of an economic liveliness down to the Skyway Marina area? So this will be probably our biggest focus over the next year from a staff standpoint as we work with all the different things that are happening in the US 19 corridor. Any questions about this? This is the highest ridership route, I think, in the PSTA system in terms of just total riders.
I know the Skyway Marina District is definitely interested in having bus rapid transit.
Yes.
Julie?
So, can you just give everybody an update as to where we are with all the overpasses in the north area?
I can do my best, and I may not get it completely accurately, but we can provide some backup so that you have that. The interchanges up to Tarpon Avenue, not including Tarpon Avenue, are all either in some stage of design or engineering study, so they've begun moving forward for that. The Curlew Road interchange, my understanding, will be under construction in 2020. Okay. Yeah. So it's in our work program for construction in 2020. And then the ones north of that, my understanding from DOT is that they will move into construction from south to north. So while the design may be a little out of sequence, the next one would be the Tampa Road and then moving north.
But aren't you looking at possibly not doing some of these overpasses?
Well, the request we had was to hold off while we do this planning activity with Pinellas County Planning Department so that we have a clear vision for the land use, which we think would inform the design. But the department has assured us that they will go slow on that design, that they will engage us in those design activities and meet with us monthly if that's what we wanted. So I think we have ample opportunities until we get to, say, the 30% design to have a lot of flexibility and inform that design as much as we can. And I'm not seeing Ming over there looking at me saying no, no, no. So I think that's a commitment that we've.
Well, I'm just trying to look at the work programs where we're at. I know we had conversation about holding off on the interchanges north of Tampa Road. We're talking about the Curlew Road currently under design is scheduled for construction. So that one's moving forward. Yeah, I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah. So really the only question from a funding standpoint would be Tarpon Avenue, because that's not yet in design. So that's one that's kind of on the table, I think. The others, they're being designed. It's still up to this board to continue to prioritize them, the MPO board. So we always have that. We could say there's something else that's more important, or we could keep them as the high priorities.
The other, I think, important fact is the way Pasco is designing their US 19, which is basically not necessarily going forward with overpasses. So we've got two different theories in Pinellas and Pasco, and they need to match up at some point in time. Bill?
The other thing that I heard on Saturday was land use. Do we want to build overpasses so that we facilitate land use development in Pasco, or do we want to try to rebuild out underutilized land use within our community by building those overpasses going all the way up to Pasco? We're really facilitating more development in that area rather than trying to help redevelop our local coast.
Other comments?
Just one more statement. I know Karen will agree with me. It's going on forever. I just would love to see FDOT move some of these projects up sooner. Because every year it goes by, it just messes with people's lives, and it's a mess on North US 19.
That's an open.
I think they should be moved up as fast as we can, but, if we could identify federal funding like we were able to before, or state funding, and that would be the only way we could move it up. Let me remind you that basically 118 all the way to Countryside Mall was not scheduled to get that started until 2021. So we were able to significantly move those projects forward. The other thing that I'd like, and I've already talked to DOT about this, is perhaps from a land development perspective, it might be wise to look at grade like we did at Enterprise, so that you can see the shopping centers and the apartments and feel like you can access them. So that might be another thought process in how those overpasses are designed.
So who would help us go after that funding? I mean, would it be?
It would be us.
Yeah.
And probably more from a city commission, city council, county commission perspective than the MPO, because I think we're kind of restricted with the MPO as to lobbying for money.
You can't lobby, right?
Huh?
You can't lobby.
I remember signing those statements.
Yeah, and that not even on US 19, but it obviously.
Oh yeah, it's very important.
And Whit, I'm just going to note that with your timeline, we're falling behind.
Okay, so let's get going.
Just a really quick question to the commissioner. Really, we did indicate or discover up in that area, and I'd really like
What area are you talking about?
The US 19 Tampa Road.
Well, yeah, and just for everybody's recollection, Pinellas County is only projected to grow by 37,000 people by the year 2040. When you compare that to Hillsborough County and Pasco County, that's a fraction of the growth in our region. I mean, a tiny, tiny fraction of the growth in our region. 37,000 is not much growth over a 25-year period.
But think about downtown St. Petersburg and the redevelopment that's been spurred and growing there. You might see that happen along the US 19 corridor, should it be?
Sure. I mean, we need to be prepared.
Yeah.
But I do think that MTOT, like you just said, has been doing a great job in getting the parts of US 19 moved up in the schedule.
Yeah, and certainly we agree that the Curlew Road, Tampa Road interchanges are critical from a safety standpoint and a congestion standpoint, so we need to stay on those. Okay, the next quarter is not really a quarter study yet, but I just wanted to bring it to your attention. This is East and West Bay Drive, and what we are doing that our board authorized at its last meeting is to look at a complete streets pilot program, pilot project for West Bay Drive from Clearwater Largo Road to the Bel Air Causeway Bridge to evaluate the feasibility of different types of safety and accessibility treatments along that stretch of roadway, which is undergoing some redevelopment. It ties in with Largo's Medical Arts District, which got some press recently and seems to be moving forward in a good way. It also connects two iconic facilities, Pinellas Trail with the Bel Air Causeway Bridge and then the Gulf Beaches. So this ties in with our Enhancing Beach Community Access Initiative. We've been in discussions with PSTA about the need for better east-west transportation in Pinellas County. This is something that our board has agreed is a priority, and the East Bay Drive corridor could be something where we begin looking at from the airport area, from our employment centers, at the ICOT Center, the PTEC area. There is a lot of employment on the eastern end of this corridor, and there's a lot of residential as you go further west. It's a commercial corridor, but it's got a lot of redevelopment opportunity. So maybe this becomes a future joint planning activity between Forward Pinellas and PSTA. Probably not this year, but maybe in a year or two that we begin to really look at what kind of multimodal strategies and redevelopment activities we can foster within this corridor. And again, it would tie in with our linking employment and residential areas. And then another study that FDOT is getting ready to do, which ties in with our Enhancing Beach Community Access, is a Pasadena Avenue study, and it's a PD&E as well. Again, probably more of a focus on complete streets and safety and accessibility. And this was a request from the city of South Pasadena a few years ago. It's now gotten into the queue where it's under a process of selecting a consultant. It's funded. I believe there's something like $400,000 allocated for this project to support redevelopment goals, connectivity, mixed use, pedestrian friendliness, sustainable land design. And the city of South Pasadena has a pretty nice redevelopment plan that they've adopted, and this would support that. And there's a resurfacing project coming up. Just like on West Bay Drive, there's a resurfacing project. So we're always looking for those opportunities to help lower some costs. There's not as much of a direct linkage with PSTA here, but I think there could be. So this is something that we certainly want to continue to look at and partner with. So that's really what I have in terms of those quarter studies. Are there any questions about any of those? Because I think they present a great opportunity for us to continue to collaborate.
And I'll just, maybe coming up later, but from the point of view of the quarter of Gandy, with what we've got going on the overpasses of 4th and 9th, and what Thea's doing with connecting the big bridge to the Leroy Selman, we have basically one light in front of the dog track that, in my opinion, that's an important quarter to look at and try to complete.
Absolutely. Yep, that makes sense. We've also been talking with the city of Dunedin about the 580 corridor. We had a good meeting with FDOT about that, and I'll have an update for you, I hope, soon. So there's not a shortage of quarter studies. What we have to look at is from a staff capacity and from a consultant budget standpoint, what can we do in any given year? So some of these we may need to do in a year or two, but we're trying to identify these corridors so that we get them teed up and we begin outreach with stakeholders, and that we can think about how they fit together in an overall vision for Pinellas County. So with that, I'll turn it over to Brad to talk about PSTA's priorities for a few minutes.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to PSTA. It's great to be back again, and I just really want to express my thanks to the Forward Pinellas staff and WIT for really, as he said, I think we've been really working really well together, and not just, the staffs have worked well together for a while, but actually coordinating our efforts more than effort. Coordinating our planning that we do at PSTA on transit up into the plans that the Forward Pinellas staff is working on, as you just saw by all those corridors. So again, what we're starting today is something that I personally am a huge supporter of, and have expressed that to WIT and the Forward Pinellas staff, of ultimately coming up with a multimodal transportation priority list of initiatives for Pinellas County. It's something I think has been sorely needed. I've worked across the country, as you know, in 3 other different areas that all had NPOs, that all had different kinds of prioritization processes. And this would be a new thing for Pinellas County, to have one list of transportation priorities that's multimodal. So what I'm going to just very briefly present, and what I think, Mr. Chair, we'll get back on time somewhat, is sort of PSTA's priorities. That's what we're here today to talk about, is sort of the transit priorities that might be considered. I know, as Whit described the timeline, the Bike PED Advisory Committee of the MPO is coming up with their own list of priorities, and then we have a very nice long list of roadway priorities that we've kind of gone through, and then that's all going to feed back to the MPO, the Forward Pinellas Board, in September to come up with a list. I think Whit or Chelsea is going to present next on how that process is all going to work. So this is sort of the transit element. What PSTA has done over the years is we basically have 3 main documents that guide our prioritization processes within public transit for Pinellas County. The agency has its strategic plan, which is the Path Forward Strategic Plan. And the projects that we have identified, the PSTA board has identified as priorities, all support this strategic plan. They're having a sustainable capital program to maintain a state of good repair of our existing service, incremental expansion, working on different expansion projects on an incremental basis, like the Central Avenue BRT, and then a vision for constantly looking to the horizon to work to improve service. So PSTA's priority projects, all a total of 7, and these are at least staff's sort of recommendation in their priority order, meet that Path Forward Strategic Plan. None of these projects should be new or surprising to you. They all either come from PSTA's adopted legislative priorities that we have forwarded over the last several years, or our transit development plan. The Florida DOT has a separate requirement on all transit systems in the state of Florida to develop a transit development plan, a TDP, and all of these projects have been in our last several TDP. So just quickly, if you look at the top 3, projects of PSTA, I think you have elements that exactly dovetail with our discussions at our last workshop back in January, and sort of grab at each of those elements of the Path Forward Strategic Plan. If you go from 3 to 1, we have more buses, improved service, better bus service throughout the county, and then a pilot of a premium transit service in the Central Avenue BRT. The Central Avenue BRT project is, of course, on its way to being fully funded and up and running, hopefully within the next 3 years. But I think, as we're going to explain, sort of as the Ford Pinellas process is, projects stay on the list, like many of the roadway projects have over the years, until they are implemented. So the Central Avenue BRT is our number one priority, and that will continue to be as we move forward. But there is a identified funding plan that we feel very good about, that we're poised to now get the construction money and get that up and running through federal and state sources. Number two is what we're working on constantly, and what we constantly hear from our customers, and what you said at your January joint workshop before. Ways in which we can expand the transit market. Right now, most of our service, especially on the weekends, ends around 5 o'clock or 4 o'clock. Almost half of our routes on weekdays end at 6 o'clock or earlier. We're trying to, within our existing fleet, expand that service. Number three, of course, is what our PSTA board enjoys talking about, or at least does talk about quite a bit, is about how we're going to replace the buses that are within our existing fleet. And we're excited to be continuing to be a leader in looking at sustainability from both an environmental and a financial perspective, looking to pilot some electric zero-emission buses in St. Petersburg, as well as continue to buy hybrid buses. Number 4 on the list is our regional package of projects. And this is essentially what we have been seeking at the federal and state legislative processes for funding to implement these regional projects. The Clearwater Beach to the Tampa International Airport Express has been our top priority the last 2 years from Tallahassee. Then 2 connections to Tampa, downtown St. Petersburg to Tampa, and over the Gandy Bridge, which is the D2D, and the downtown St. Petersburg to the airport over the Howard Franklin Bridge, or connecting to the TBX lanes. Then 4th on that list is the Gateway Intermodal Center. Having a center somewhere in the Gateway area tying right into the Ford Pinellas' spotlight priority of looking at the Gateway area, a hub for the TBX, for transit connections across the bay, for this employment center, perhaps cable-propelled transit, or whatever comes down the line in the future. Number 5 is our regional, not really a regional fare box project, but is a mobile ticketing regional project that we are working closely, as you know, with HART. We're going to be unveiling the first mobile ticketing app next month, in early September, and then building on it from there. That project is funded. We have been seeking federal and state funding to support it, but it'll to bring it along faster, but it will come online fully within the next 2 years. Number 6 is the Clearwater Intermodal Center. This has been a project for a very long time that we've been working with the city of Clearwater on, and I think it ties right into a lot of the work that the MPO is doing there. This would essentially replace the Park Street terminal with a new, improved transit center in Clearwater. It has been discussed at the Clearwater City Council to be a possible shared use with a new Clearwater City Hall. It might be also a place that cable-propelled transit connecting to the beach over to Clearwater Beach might work out of. And then last but not least is, again, looking from the pilot of the Central Avenue BRT to incrementally over time, a full network of premium transit services. As we just discussed through the corridor studies, our highest ridership routes are Seminole Boulevard, East Bay, US 19. All those corridors have been planned for a premium transit or BRT services in the future. We know that the all of those areas are looking for premium transit, from the Skyway Marina District to northern Pinellas County. Largo is working on that. So constantly working to incrementally improve to provide that premium transit as funding might exist. As you can see from the list of projects, PSTA, there are capital projects on this list and operational projects on this list. That's a new idea for this prioritization process that the MPO hopefully will go forward, is not necessarily limiting itself to just capital projects, but there are funding options through the Florida DOT for both operating and capital components for public transit. Several other MPOs across the state of Florida fund transit, operating expenses of transit, by taking some of their FDOT dollars and allocating it to increase block grant funds for their transit system. Same thing could happen in Pinellas to fund some of these operational projects. Are there any questions or comments about sort of what the prioritization list that PSTA has worked on? Most of this is not new. It's just drawn either from the TDP or our legislative priorities that we've had in the past. Again, the idea is this is sort of PSTA's submission into this Forward Pinellas process, that you'll also be getting bike ped projects and highway projects, and come out with a, I'm sure, awesome list in a couple months.
Did I understand you say the regional fare box is funded, but the additional funding will just expedite? Is that
Yes.
correct? Okay.
Additional funding would expedite the project. It would also free up capital dollars that are in our budget and in HART's budget for some of these other initiatives. Mr. Joseph.
When you started going through this project list, you said in reference to priority number 3, it's more buses. Those are primarily replacement buses?
That's right. Replacement buses, and then obviously to implement priority number 2, especially frequency on the weekdays, we would need more buses. Our buses our fleet that we currently have sort of capped out on weekday usage. So to improve frequency on the weekdays, we would need to not only replace the fleet we have, but get more vehicles. I know there's been some discussion at the MPO's advisory committee level, the technical committee, about whether or not, and I think there was some discussion at our last workshop by the boards about this idea that maybe this list of prioritization must be for new or expanded transportation projects, so that, say, road resurfacing could not be a priority, or replacement buses could not be a priority that the Forward Pinellas top list would include. That I don't think dovetails exactly with what PSTA's priorities are. That's why we have number 3 on there as replacement buses. But it's not the worst thing in the world, because if some of these other things are funded through another source, then PSTA's focus can be on maintaining a capital program, and the federal funds that we receive can be then focused on maintaining what we have.
Thank you. On your downtown to downtown express routes, are those dependent on TBX, or is there a plan B if we don't get the shoulder access? And my follow-up to that is if we can get a 30-second update from me on the status of TBX within Pinellas County.
They're not requiring TBX or shoulder access. We would have a plan to start them regardless of that. Of course, without TBX, they sit in the traffic. They provide an express option, free Wi-Fi, comfortable seats. You can play Pokemon Go.
So it's not dependent, but it would be better.
Right.
And so what's the status mean?
far as the overall TBX project, we're still working on the funding. We had part of the funding for the system. We're still quite short. So I think the Express Bus project is really dependent on the funding for the expressway project as well. And I think the timing is perfect with this premium transit study. Art is doing, we're going to look at it as part of the overall system for premium transit within the Tampa Bay area. Maybe we can incorporate that as part of the, not only the TBX project, but also the overall premium transit system.
We're not dependent on Hillsborough's portion of TBX receiving all the approvals that they need on that side of the bay. Is it dependent?
Well, we are working on getting federal approval for that project. There are different segments, including 8 segments. So they all at various stage of getting approval, and obviously segment 1 is being constructed as part of the Gandy project. That's moving forward.
When I look at the map, it still stops at Gateway in terms of the exclusive TBX lanes. So, we've talked about this before, from Gateway to St. Pete, are we only envisioning shoulder access for buses, or is there still an opportunity for a full TBX connection between Gateway and St. Pete, downtown St. Pete?
I think as far as the express lanes are concerned, that's something we will look at in the future. But for shoulder access, we actually actively working with central office to do some sort of pilot project. I think statewide, there's a lack of guiding policy or procedure in how to run bus and shoulder. And central office is willing to come down and do a pilot project actually here in Pinellas County. So it's a golden opportunity for us to get some funding, get some support over that kind of project.
Thank you.
On section 4, when you're talking about downtown to downtown, are you going to be working with the cities so that the cities can target an area of a drop-off spot for their downtown areas?
Definitely.
From one end to another where they think that it might be beneficial for the passengers?
Oh, most definitely. Obviously, this is a commuter-oriented service, so we want it to be fast and express. We would definitely want to look at places like park and ride facilities, drop-off locations that are accessible to the jobs in both downtown Tampa and downtown St. Petersburg, but with other access points, not only for transit users, but people can drive their car and park and then hop on the bus for a stress-free commute. Exactly.
And I have one other question. Doing my mayor's visits, I went to a business, I'm not sure if you're familiar with it or not, it's called Freedom Scientific.
Okay.
They're just to the south here at 118th Avenue and 31st Street. They design items for people that are visually impaired or blind.
Okay.
They have a lot of people that work for them that are visually impaired and blind that ride your buses. Are you going to ever target areas where, let's say they get on the bus at downtown and there's a group of people that stay on that bus through all of the stops to a targeted area where you can have a little bit more, maybe 2 buses riding, one that continually stops, one that picks up people at one spot and drops them off at another. Like in an industrial area here, where they might get on the bus, 4th Street in St. Pete, that bus stops 5 times, but the majority of the people that are on it get off in an industrial area or a high business area for jobs.
Sure.
To possibly have 2 buses running, one that stops.
Like an express and a local, essentially. Yeah, we actually have that already in a limited capacity on 49th and also down to the South Beaches. We have an express that overlays sort of a local. That's what these services over to Tampa would sort of mimic also. There is a slow way to get there or a fast way. That's exactly what we're trying to do. Look at targeted employment centers, find different ways to connect, as Whit said, sort of the residential areas with the employment centers in the best way possible.
Brad, on number 5, regional fare box, when will we hear back if we're going to get the
Tiger funding, Tiger grant funding?
Well, I haven't actually seen an official press release yet, so I'm keeping out hope, although I saw some media that just this morning in my inbox that we were not successful. So in the last go-around, I think we gave it a great shot. Keep hope alive, but I think we maybe were not selected, as far as I can tell. In this go-around, that doesn't mean the project stops. The project has been funded through the PSTA and HART and several other county transit systems capital budgets. It will just mean that it will stay on the current timeline where it is, where we're going to roll it out in a month, sort of phase one, but it will not be fully implemented for about 18 months.
Brett, are the minibuses feasible, and are they being considered in your replacement buses?
Yes. The PSTA board just voted last month in June to buy smaller buses, and that's our plan moving forward. The minibuses are feasible in certain applications, not throughout all of Pinellas County, not on these major corridors, but yes, we're actually working with the DOT to place an order for more shuttle buses, or like the airport shuttle buses kind of thing. One idea that we've had for the Clearwater Beach Airport Express would be to start that with smaller buses, maybe like a premium, like one of these airport shuttles with sort of roomy seats and be very sort of premium, and then watch as the ridership grows and try to develop it. And then once it materializes, then expand to a larger bus.
To add to that, we already have an existing T-bar, a van and carpool service that Mayor Becker is expanding. They've gone from like 70 circular smaller buses to the people to 90 now. And that is a program that's through FTA. I mean, federal dollars is coming through that process. So I think we can collaborate and work together so we don't create and recreate silos, which is something that I think we all don't want to continue down that road. But my actual question, Brad, is on number 3. I think that my colleague has asked, is it replacement or new? Because you have there that it's replacement, but are we adding new for the expanded services that you're presenting?
Number 3 specifically is for replacement, maintaining of our existing fleet, replacement buses. That's what the number 3 priority is. There are new buses in some of the other priorities listed on there. Central Avenue BRT will have specific vehicles, new buses. Number 2 will need new buses. The other projects need new. Number 3 is replacement.
So, like, for example, the $16 million for the Central Avenue BRT includes, 5 new buses?
Okay, good. That answers a great question. And those are specific types of buses.
Yeah, it's
that would not be used on other kinds of lines because they're premium type buses.
Yeah.
Wi-Fi and local coffee. Yeah, all kinds of things.
USB ports.
Any other questions or comments?
Thank you.
Okay, we'll try to go through the draft prioritization process before we take our break.
While she's setting that up, if I could just add that downtown to downtown express, we will be bringing that back to the TMA leadership group for discussion, because we, at our last TMA leadership group between Hillsborough, Pasco, and Pinellas, we talked about regional express bus being in the priority list that organization develops and recommends for each of the MPOs to adopt. And so that downtown to downtown express could potentially use the Selman extension dedicated lanes for toll lanes And so it's one of a family of potential regional express bus service concepts. So we are coordinating regionally on those kinds of systems. It's not just us and PSTA thinking about what would be nice. But if I asked you, if you dropped in from another region or another planet, do we have existing bus service between downtown Tampa and downtown St. Petersburg? And I told you didn't, I think you'd all be pretty incredulous to learn that if you came from a different region. So that's one aspect that we're trying to remedy with that project.
Okay. So that's been touched on. So now I'm going to talk to you guys about the draft prioritization process that the Ford Pinellas Board is moving forward with. So as Whit already alluded to, we have to establish a performance-based and outcome-driven planning process. This is a federal requirement, and it has to complement statewide performance measures that FDOT is going to be working on developing as well. We have a mission to align our resources with a vision to improve our community. However, our current prioritization process really only looks at roadway network. It doesn't look at our bike ped or our transit priorities. Sorry, on the side. We have to use our countywide plan, our long-range transportation plan as the basis. In those plans, we have stated goals and objectives, but we don't have any measures to help prove that we're meeting those goals and objectives. So that's what we're going to be working on. We can use that to tell the story. We can support our message with different proof points that come out of the performance measures and the targets that we set. And those performance measures are also going to help communicate performance information to the public and our stakeholders. As what talked about, we have to demonstrate effective and improved performance. Every project that we move forward in our 5-year work program, we have to show that that project is helping to meet the goals that we set. We'd already covered this, MAP 21 in the FAST Act, saying that we have to describe performance measures and targets that states and the MPOs use to assess system performance. So it just comes to what are the desired outcomes for transit, and our project programming has to support those desired outcomes. These are just some examples of what some other communities are doing. In Denver, the performance measures they have, they're based on transit and jobs accessibility. They determine good accessibility to be 100,000 plus jobs within a 45-minute transit trip. And they target all residents and also those living in low-income and minority communities. In Orlando, they look at the percent of their population within a quarter mile of transit service and also percent of employment within a quarter mile. Again, these are just examples. We haven't developed these measures yet, but these are what other MPOs are doing across the nation, and the projects that they program have to show how they're making progress towards these goals. So currently, when it comes to our transit priorities, PSTA takes the lead. The MPO and the local communities, we've been involved in like the Pinellas AA and helping PSTA set their priorities. But for the most part, PSTA sets their priorities, and then it's up to the PSTA's local funding to pay for them. Regarding bike ped, in the MPO, we have a priority or a policy statement that says completing the Pinellas Trail Loop is a priority. However, we don't have it on any kind of priority list, really. It's sitting at the bottom of our transportation alternatives list with an asterisk that says for other funding. We don't have a mechanism to help support the fact that that is a priority of the MPO. The MPO is involved in the TA program, but for the most part, if there's a bike ped project, it's up to the local governments to fund it and get it done. For the 2040 long-range plan, sorry, some of those are kind of washed out. These were the criteria that we used to prioritize our projects, and you'll see there's a shout out to some different modes up there. If it improved access to intermodal facilities, if there's planned future transit on the corridor. However, with this criteria, we only targeted major roadway projects. We did not look at transit or bike ped. In addition to that, we also only prioritize state roads. For the county roads, we worked with Pinellas County to help prioritize their roadway projects, but we don't put it on our list. We kind of just help them prioritize it. We include it in the long-range plan for reference, but we do not use any of our federal discretionary dollars on those projects. In order for projects to be funded, they have to be on the priority list. Sunrail in Orlando and Express Bus Service in Broward County, those projects were prioritized by the MPO and included on their priority list. So this is what we're recommending. We're recommending a prioritization process that looks at major network and connectivity gaps. We've developed some draft prioritization criteria. The criteria, it's not going to be, 1 point for this, 1 point for that. We wanted to leave it more broad and relate everything back to our goals with a focus on connectivity. The ability of our project to close a gap, regardless of the mode, becomes the key parameter. And we're looking to maintain separate lists. I'm going to show you what that looks like in just a minute. And it'll be up to the Ford Pinellas board to select the ultimate composition of that priority list. And again, the scoring is just a tool. If Councilmember Kennedy, you brought up the Gandy Gap, that kind of has risen to the top. Now we've realized we've created a bottleneck in the network. So that might rise to a little bit higher priority than something else that was a former priority. So this is what it looks like. We're looking to develop the 3 different lists. We'll have a roads list, a transit list that PSTA has developed, and we're going to be working with our Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee to look at major bicycle and pedestrian projects in that list. We're going to be workshopping this with all of our committees in August to develop a recommendation for a top 10 list to bring to the board, and that top 10 list would be transmitted to DOT. We'd be looking for our board to have a policy to pick at least 1 project from each list. But for example, our board could decide to advance 8 roadway projects, 1 transit project, 1 bike ped project, or a couple from each. That would ultimately be up to the board to decide how to move forward. And with that, I'll take any questions you may have.
Why don't you back up one slide?
Yes, that's the important one.
I'm not seeing any. So, Dorothy?
Remind me again, Chelsea, on the major bike and ped, what do we do, what do we do in terms of allocating funding for major bike projects that doesn't just blow out the budget for
everything else? So what we'll be doing is, DOT has said this repeatedly, don't tell us what dollars to use on which project, just give us your priorities and we'll see how we can fund them. Our federal discretionary dollars, currently we're getting about $10 million a year, but that fluctuates. So what we'd be looking to do is really just move forward the projects and leave it up to DOT to assemble the funding in the future years to make them happen. And for the bike ped, for this year, because we're doing this very quickly, we don't have a whole lot of time to do a major call for projects. We're looking to take our Pinellas Trail Loop segments. We have 2 overpass projects on there and a couple other trails throughout the county. So we're going to take those projects from the TA list, well, leaving them on the TA list, but copying them over and prioritizing them for this year.
And the transportation alternatives list is a much, it's focused on bicycle and pedestrian projects, but we get a lot less money in that. So it's on average $1.5 million or so a year. So if you were to try and fund the Pinellas Trail Loop, that would take 10 years or so to fund 1 segment. So it's that's better suited for the $300,000 to $500,000 to $800,000 projects, sidewalks and crossings and things like that. And then can I add one more thing? I think in my version of this, I added for roads /complete streets. So just to be clear, that can be capacity or it can be a road modification. Sometimes if you're retrofitting a roadway and you have to get into stormwater, drainage, and things like that, that can be a pretty expensive endeavor too. So the roads project is all encompassing of any type of major roadway project we'd want to advance, not just a highway capacity project necessarily.
Any other questions or comments?
Thank you. As we know, I mean, there's several of us here that have tried very hard with the Tiger Grant for the 2 last pieces of the 70, I would say 75, but 70, I guess, is kind of loop. So there's 1 segment of St. Pete, there's 1 segment of Stillwater. And we know that the coast-to-coast trail is really moving along quickly. What other ways, since we're going to take that major bike funding and look at the 2 overpasses and some smaller projects, what other ways can we go after funding for those 2 segments? Since it's important to the complete infrastructure of the region.
Good.
Well, there's the Sun Trail funding, which is in 3 main pots. So the first pot is for the coast-to-coast connector. The second one is for the river to the sea loop, which is over in Volusia and Putnam and a couple other counties, Flagler County. And then the third pot is for any other projects in the state that you can apply for. We scored pretty well in that ranking list that gave the river to the sea loop the top after the coast to coast. So we've advanced that, working with the county. The county kind of led that, so that's part of the Sun Trail application. And there's $25 million a year that the legislature is setting aside for the Sun Trails program.
When will we know?
Probably this fall sometime. Brian, do you have more information about that?
He's actually responded to the department's request to segment that trail, because overall they put it in as one project and it was $20-something million.
It's super
That was too much. So Sun Trail folks in Tallahassee said, can you break it down? And we did that. Gina Harvey did that for us, and they're in the $4 million, $5 million categories, and we're very hopeful for funding this cycle, which will be announced the first week of August.
Other questions or comments? Then we'll take a 10-minute break about now and reconvene about 10:35.
You getting feedback? Getting a little bit of feedback, squealing noise. Yeah, well, they told me you were, so I just had to come and check. Don't hear anything?
I'm not.
It's the ringing in my ears from the houses. I don't know.
Yeah. It might be because if they get this microphone pointed that way. Okay.
Like 2 years ago, I was trying to
Yeah, okay, I did.
I think we can convince that. And it takes, like the zoo is like a straight shot. Yeah, and then there's a bus, and other places. And it made this. Different bus for that same bus. They can still get to where they need to pull out. Because when it saves I was like, green light and said, do you know what? Oh, you get that. I'll make this up.
I'm going to write a letter on that whole, but I've been following your
There was that other thing about the routing in downtown Tampa is very important to the riders. We were actually supposed to go on our Franklin. One idea was to go on our Franklin. Ward of Salem. our Franklin is very much proposed by the downtown
I see the bus all the time now. I see the bus all the time.
Yeah.
Around this.
They had 300X and 100X. 300X goes to the Elmerson Park and Ride League.
Yeah, that was just Great job. Thank you. All right. I would say I don't Really?
think you're right. Here's kind of the bottom
Good?
Yeah. So
If I could ask everybody to try to go back to the seats, we'll try
Tina's like, well, I even got it yesterday, so I think she's gonna get it right now. I'm not sure I have her. Okay, just send it. Send me an email saying, can you forward this? And I was like, I'm really sorry.
Okay, it's good that we have a lot of socialization going on in the break. If we can come back, we'll move to our last section of our agenda, which is integrated planning and prioritization.
Okay.
Whit, are you leading us on this?
I am.
Okay.
So this is the interactive part of your meeting, more so than even we've had. In planning this work session, we really wanted to give you as much time as possible to just talk, because that happens so rarely. I know our board meetings are very orchestrated, and we're always kind of cognizant of how much time we have. So we've left about an hour and a half, and we may not need all that time. But we've started with some broader questions that I think will facilitate a discussion. Chelsea, and I'm going to step over here. Can you all hear me okay if I'm not in the microphone?
Yes.
Is that okay? Yes. Because I feel really sequestered over there.
Go to the corner.
No. Chelsea's handing out 3 index cards, and some of you, we've worked with this on a little bit of an exercise. I think the act of writing things down just kind of helps your thinking process a little bit, and maybe facilitates a better discussion. So again, I'm going to take you back to the policy direction that we need. The policy direction we need going into September is really thinking about what are the outcomes that you want to see for an integrated multimodal transportation network for Pinellas County, and how does PSTA fit into that vision? How does PSTA fit into the outcomes that we want for our transportation system? So I'm going to start with the first question, and what I want you to do is to look at this question, and you've got on one of your index cards, I want you to write down as many responses as you can think of in the next 2 minutes. I'm going to make it quick. So just what gut reaction do you have? What transit outcomes, public transportation, private transportation, but transit outcomes do you want to see in 3, 5, and 10 years? And just take a minute to write down. What would you like to see? Plant a flag for success in year 3, plant a flag for success in year 5, and then a little further out, year 10.
Are these to be more specific performance measures like you showed for Orlando and others, or broader?
It can be however you want. It can be a type of service. It can be people served. It can be places to go. I don't want to dictate too much. financial outcomes, they can be service outcomes, they can be collaboration outcomes, although I have a separate question for that. Now, as you're writing this down, what I'm going to do is go around the room in a few minutes after we go through these questions and just ask you to report not necessarily everything you've written down. We'll have you turn those in. I would like you to make sure you put initials on your cards so that we know who's writing down what. It helps us, in case we have questions, to go back to you. Brad's got 20 cards, by the way. When you feel like you've got that answered, go ahead and flip that card over and we'll go to the next question. I'll give you 30 more seconds.
Oh, pressure.
And again, the more specific you make it, the better it is for us. The more general you make it, we can fit more things under it. So there's pros and cons to each approach. Okay, we're going to go a little broader on the next question. Everybody ready? Mostly? Okay. We can come back. All right, so the next question is simple. What are your top 3 ideas for making transportation work better for Pinellas County and Tampa Bay? So it's a little different. This isn't focused on transit. This is broader. It could be land use. It could be technology. It could be communication. It could be governance. What are your top 3 ideas for making transportation work better for Pinellas County and Tampa Bay? So we're elevating up to the 50,000-foot level here. And I only want 3. And remember to put your initials at the bottom of the card. And Maine has 20 cards for this one. And it'd be interesting if all the staff in the room wants to play along. We'll compare staff notes versus board notes later. Okay, we'll give you another minute on this one, and then we'll move to the last one. And again, this is just to kind of get the discussion going. We're not going to hold you to all these. You might, the value of then reporting out is that you might hear something better than what you thought of. So, keep these and feel free to revise and extend your remarks as appropriate. Yeah, if you're writing paragraphs and you need another card, we can accommodate that. I have more up here. Okay, how's everybody doing? Need a little more time? About done? Okay, let's move on to the last question. which is a little bit different entirely. How do we measure our success at collaboration? And there's no limit to how many you can write down. But I want to remind you, earlier when I said that collaboration was a priority at your last workshop, collaboration means a lot of things. It can mean communication. It can mean working in partnership to develop something. It can mean advocating for something. It can mean funding something. Collaboration is a pretty broad term. But how do we measure that? How do we look back if Brad and I get together in a year or in 2 years? Or if our chairmen get together? What did we achieve? Are we doing better? How can we say that we've accomplished some things in partnership that we can be proud of? How do you measure that? What does success look like? Okay, we'll give you another minute on this one. And again, it's just quick gut reactions. And I think as we go around the room, you'll maybe get a little more clarity of some of these things. Okay, so as you think about collaboration, I'm going to back up to the first question. And Sarah Perch is going to write down some notes here. And I'd like to maybe just see who's ready to talk about transit outcomes rather than going person by person by person. But who would like to talk about some of the transit outcomes? Maybe just one thing on your list that you identified. Is there somebody who wants to volunteer first? Mayor Redberg.
Sidewalks and complete streets. When you drive throughout the county, you see areas that have sidewalks. Another area that probably was developed 20 years ago, no sidewalks because that wasn't thought of back then. And then you go on a little bit further down the road, you see sidewalks again. Getting those areas completed.
So having sidewalk connections to maybe enhance better access to transit?
Absolutely. And bikers and pedestrians, having the capabilities for people to get to a bus stop, or if they just want to be healthy and walk from one area to another, to do it safely.
Okay.
Fast, easy connections to Tampa International Airport.
Okay. Do you see that in a 3, 5, or a 10-year? How do you characterize that? Short-term, mid-term, long-term?
Depends on the mode.
Okay, so fast, easier connections to Tampa International Airport. Okay, we've got a bunch of people now, so how about Councilmember?
The express lane from 60 to Memorial, and I would like to see that in 3 to 5 years now.
The express busway, bus lane from downtown Clearwater to Memorial Bridge, over the Memorial.
It has.
And what was your time frame? 3 to 5 years, okay. All right, let's go over here, Commissioner Welch. We'll just go down the list.
Okay.
Commissioner Welch.
Kind of piggybacking on Darden's, I would say usable connections between all activity centers. So St. Pete, Tampa, Clearwater. What a visitor would expect when they get it.
Okay.
We don't have it.
How do you define usable?
Doesn't take 2 hours. Something like an express lane or premium transit.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Tying on to the first comment there, more safety for cyclists. We encourage bikes on buses, more bike lanes, but this is not a fun county if you're trying to get around on a bicycle.
Okay. So better connectivity of cycling to transit,
yes,
for example. Okay. Commissioner Long.
Yes, I would like to see a direct connection between Pinellas County and Tampa International, as well as International Mall. And I also agree with Mayor Bradbury on the complete streets and walkable and sustainable communities throughout Pinellas County for sure.
I think that helps ridership, definitely.
Yeah.
The evidence shows that transit ridership is based on having a walkable destination on ideally both ends of those trips.
And in all of mine, I focused on some type of a people mover or light rail system because I think that's how you get larger numbers of folks moving along and less cars off the road.
Right, I'm going to go to this side of the room. Commissioner Eggers?
Yeah, kind of a realistic, maybe on-time system that allows people to get from work, home to work. A portal that allows you a realistic way to get there in a timely fashion. Most folks go to work and they work at their office and they go home. Some jobs you have to move around all day and you have to have your own car, but many times, if you could do it on a timely fashion, you could just leave your car at home and get there, but there's just no way to do that. There's no way to find out what the alternatives are in an easy way. So I kind of like to connect our homes with our businesses in a smooth, realistic time frame, and I'm thinking probably that should be able to be done in 3 years. But
so when you say portal, help me understand what you mean by
some way for people to easily plug in. You get on here and you find out.
Okay,
You pull up
communications.
Uber and you find out who's nearby to get me to where I need to go.
Okay.
So how do I get home, or how do I get from my home to work on a you know, if you could do it in 20 minutes in a car, you got to be able to do it in 25 minutes, 30 minutes in a bus, and not.
Yep. So competitive travel times.
Yeah.
So it's a service thing, but it's also a technology thing that you're talking
Competitive
about.
travel.
Okay. Mr. Dave?
Yeah, I'd like to get some sort of a resolution in the next 3 years on how the current transportation, the railroad that we have going from St. Pete to Hillsborough, how that works, how that could work. It seems like something that has been sitting around for a long time and nobody has really worked on, and that should be done.
So integrating the railroad better in our transportation network.
Yeah. Does it work, or does it?
Okay. All right. Very good.
Well, 3, 5, 10 years, they're all great numbers. I think that what we need to, and we all have heard from the Broward County NPM director, and Wick, who's been doing an outstanding job here in Pinellas County as our Fort Pinellas director. Public-private partnerships, we need to get the private sector involved. We can't fund it all just on what we do in Pinellas County and in FDOT and the state and federal levels. We need to work, just like Congressman Mike has been doing, on private funding sources. We have a lot of development going on throughout our 11 beach communities, and we have a lot of development going on in St. Pete. We all have a desire to get connected to St. Pete Clearwater International Airport, Tampa International Airport, the port. You know, there's a lot of things buzzing around in our beautiful region. And sitting on T-BARDA and on TMA, on CCC, and all the different transportation boards that I sit on, we really need to study how do we get the private sector to come forward and help us with some of these projects that we have going. Bike share regionally, water taxi, Jolly Tropic, all the expansions of all these different products. We want to make sure we stay focused. We have a county with 24 cities. So as our Fort Pinellas does our studies and works closely with FDOT, I think in the quick 3-year side, we need to figure out how we can get the private side to start helping support us with some great ideas. Because you go to other cities, whether it's just been building bike share programs, amazing. You know, first mile, last mile, like Senator Brandis wants for the PSTA, that Uber process works. You know, there's all these different technologies that we need to get the private sector in the 3-year first.
Okay. As a funding or service
Absolutely.
provider partner.
Absolutely. Funding, because CPT, we can get CPT going, and we can move a mass amount, like what we just heard. But we've got to get the private sector to step up and start making that happen.
Okay. Who would like to go next? Commissioner Gerard?
I'd like to see our basic bus service be running a minimum of half-hour service on every route, and till midnight on the high employment in 5 years.
Okay. Very specific. Very good. Commissioner Mers and then Commissioner Johnson, I think next.
I think mine probably comes out of frustration. It seems like I think we need better collaboration because we tend to, seems from a driving perspective, tend to be finishing projects and then shortly thereafter starting them back up again. Like the Omerton. We had Omerton fixed for like 2 weeks. It was fantastic. And then all of a sudden now it's like, and it's been going for just years and years and years. And when there are situations like you're doing a sewer project and there's no bike lane or there's no sidewalk there, it's obvious that one day it's going to have to be there. So figure out a way to put it in at the time when you're doing it, not as soon as you finish the one project, then all of a sudden now we're putting in a bike path and back up the cones, and it just slows everything up again. So that coordination is just so frustrating, and it seems, it's not like nobody knows that eventually it needs to be done. I understand the funding issues or whatever, but try to do it in such a way that you can minimize the issues.
So more efficient delivery of transportation projects.
Yeah, and coordination of that. You know, obviously there was a nice picture there of roads and transit and bike and pedestrians and the boxes. That speaks to this, where you're recognizing that it's not there now, it will need to be done, instead of just waiting for it. And big roads like that in 19 and whatever that just continually being worked on, do the realization that it's got to be done, and now that we're inconveniencing everybody and tying them up, this is the time to do it, and figure out a way to do it.
So one of the things we've started doing is looking at where the resurfacing projects are happening, and then seeing what we can do as part of that resurfacing project to get as much done.
Add as much dollar and bang for the dollar at that.
Very good. Commissioner Johnson.
Building on Councilmember Caudiel's comment about private-public partnerships in transit, I think we have an opportunity to work with the major employers in the area and really find out what their needs are for transit, for their employees, and work that, tie that into land use as well as into getting people to and from.
So like the Gateway folks who want more restaurants and shops near their office developments, is that kind of what you're doing?
I'm thinking of the Raymond James and the Franklin Templeton going in and really understand what their business needs are related to getting people to and from, and then trying to build that into the land use planning and our transportation planning as well.
To build on Commissioner Johnson's comment, since we don't have a lot of experience working with P3 projects, which usually involve huge amounts of money, oversight, I think strategically we should look for smaller projects to build that experience working with a P3 private partnership scenario, so that we develop the experience so that we're ready for when we want to take on a much bigger project. Because we've heard good stories about P3s, but we've also heard bad ones.
So have like a pilot P3, for instance. Okay. Commissioner Long, come back to you.
Yes, I would like to, again, build on some of the things I've heard around the table, but suggest that within that 3-year time frame, surely at some level, we begin to have a discussion about a regional funding mechanism. Because to Commissioner or Councilwoman Caudiel's comments, we just literally can't afford to go it alone on the funding.
Okay. Very good. Commissioner Welch?
And in that same vein, within the next 5 years, I believe PSTA has to solve the capital deficit issue for capital projects. So that's a 5-year window.
Yeah, that's a cliff that's hitting in what, 2021, 2020?
Depending on which buses we buy.
Yeah. Commissioner Shelley, I heard from you.
Based on the success of the Central Avenue bus rapid transit, expand that to more corridors where we think there's the highest likelihood of success, and continue to work regionally like we did with the Tiger grant for the regional fare box.
So part one is completing the BRT within 3 years.
Yes.
Okay. You heard it there, Brad. And then part two is then building on that success and seeing where else BRT might be successful.
Correct.
Very good. Mayor Beavis.
Most of these have been said, but I'll just say them anyway. But longer hours for the PSTA buses and more frequent runs.
Is that a shorter term goal, 3 to 5, or is that a 10-year?
Next week.
You got the cash? Get ready?
Federal funding. I think it was mentioned before that, these are all great ideas, but somehow we've got to pay for them. It was mentioned, I wrote it in something else, but use of the CSX line, I think that's a missed opportunity for the region, to be honest with you.
I'll put that in your longer term category.
Yeah.
CSX.
And then, I don't know what the name of them are, but the smart traffic signals, I'd actually like them to work.
The adaptive signal control system.
Whatever it's called, it doesn't work.
Make it more adaptive.
Make it, yeah, I can't tell you how many times I've sat at intersections and nobody is going anywhere. So it doesn't seem to be very smart.
So a few months ago, Ken Jacobs and I went to the city of Largo and gave a little presentation to their council, and he answered more questions than I could. Maybe we could do that at your city council or something.
Be great.
Yeah, happy to do that. Yes, last but not least, Mr. Chairman.
In 3 years, Central Avenue BRT up and running. In 5 years, complete Gandy, complete the Pinellas Trail Loop, and be successful in a unified referendum for funding transit with Pinellas and Hillsborough together. And in 10 years, have aerial transit.
Aerial transit.
Aerial transit.
Cable.
Aerial.
We have enough acronyms. You're adding another one.
What'd you call it?
CPT.
Cable propelled.
Okay.
Aerial transit, Walt Disney Monorails, 1976, whichever one we want to pick.
Let me give Sarah a little time to get all that down for a second, and then I'll come to Mayor Wachowski in just a second. Are you getting there? Do you need to repeat any of that? Okay. Mayor Wachowski.
I am going to build off of what Mr. Gerard said and Mayor Beavis, but I think it's important to say it again. I think it's grand to want all the regional connections that we're doing, and I think that's absolutely the right thing to do. But I think where we fail is no one in the county wants to use our bus service unless they have to, because there is not enough frequency and not enough nighttime hours. And in order to get our county residents behind transportation, we have to give them a product they're excited about. And it's not just a bus to the airport, it's the everyday service. And if they see that we manage that well, that all of it is a quality product, then when we might go to ask for money, they might actually give it to us. But right now, they see a crappy product, no offense against anybody. It takes them 2 hours, and then they've got to connect to another bus. And so why are they going to hand us money? Why are they going to make transportation a priority when we can't accomplish the basic things that we need to do? And that goes to funding. So helping us solve the funding issue of getting just the basic service that Pinellas County residents need should be the #1 priority. No offense against our list. I understand why we're doing all of that, but we can solve this before we can get anybody on board with anything. And secondary on my list too is all county roads should have bus service, and they don't. I mean, that's unacceptable to me.
All county roads
Should have bus service, but they don't. That's not the county, that's us. But it's because we don't have funding.
Right.
And you have to pick and choose and build on the successful areas at the expense of areas that may not look so successful, but it's the chicken or the egg. If it's not successful and you're providing 2-hour service, is it not successful if you're providing 2-hour service or you don't have a service at all? So to me, that should be in the transit world the #1 priority.
Yeah, I mean, this is a tough statement to make, but to Mayor Wojcicki's point, you have it's impossible to get there if you don't have leadership strong enough to ensure that you have the funding. I mean, that's
No,
the
and
bottom
that's it.
line. That's the bottom line.
That's the elephant in the
So
room.
stronger leadership would be one of your
That was
key-
number one thing on my part.
Commissioner Finger.
Thanks. Kind of in addition to what's being said, on the transit outcome, I had, in my 5-year, was less pavement and retail, resulting in essentially forcing people to have to use what we provide, which is also in the same sense of what we provide needs to be a good product. But I think we live in a place where if we don't have to use the system, we're not going to, we don't use it. So kind of we here all at the table, and the only one I've used is the 300X. If we don't use it, then we're planning for out there. Then out there, that's a very different separation to me.
So you're actually talking about constraining road building and bettering transit service so that there's more equity of those modes.
Yeah, and I think that our city codes should reduce the number of parking spots, the amount of asphalt that sits in front of our stores. We need to take that away.
So parking reform.
Yes, we need to do away with that, and it's going to then put us in an environment that makes our system worthwhile when people are saying to themselves, I'm not going to use that, I don't use that, why do I need to use that? But when you live in all the places we like to reference, Chicago and Boston and San Francisco and all that, they say, heck no, I am not going to sit in that to get to where I want to go when I can jump on that. So if we're not playing on both sides, which is, I guess, in our planning and our codes, and we're not enforcing this instead of saying, well, it would be nice if we did that, but you don't have to. And then we want everybody to take the bus because it saves us, it's environmentally friendly. Then we're sending two totally different messages, I think, in how we plan.
Who have not heard from? Councilmember Bowman, any thoughts?
Yes, well, great minds think alike, because Darden, Ken, Janet, I think everybody said mine, which better connections between Tampa and St. Pete. I think about the baseball games, and even Raymond James. If I could park my vehicle and take transit or something to the baseball game, and don't have to worry about it, that would be great. I would like to see that now. I think Mayor Stevens said something about we put more money, more funding to purchase electric buses. So I'm a big fan of that. And then more frequent and longer routes to help people get to and from work. And then, and from downtown St. Pete, maybe if I want to go to Dunedin or, anything. So more frequent and longer.
So better linking up our destinations. And that was something you all talked about 6 months ago, so I'm glad somebody came back to that. All right, I'm going to move on to the next question, and I don't want to forget anybody, but you kind of touched on this one because some of your ideas went beyond just transit. Are there anything else in terms of top 3 ideas that we haven't touched on from anybody? Yes, Commissioner Murphy.
This just, I think, follows up of, I think the end mile, I think, is important. To make it simpler, it's important to have frequency and longer trips and stuff like that, but making it easy to get from your house to ultimately where you want to go. And so if that's how to get from your house to the bus station to pick up the bus, or once the bus drops you off, how to get to your place of work or your place of business or wherever you're going to go, that last connection, I think, is critical. And from a transportation work, if you're going to want to get these people out there, it can't take much longer than it would take for you just to drive there. Otherwise, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. So I think making that end connection on either side more fluid and easier in conjunction with the other things, I think would improve overall transportation and make it more desirable to do.
So more seamless connection for walking, for bicycling, for
everything.
Uber, whatever might be there as that last mile. Very good. Yes, sir.
Do we have any on there about intermodal, more intermodal?
I haven't heard too much yet in terms of, are you talking about capital facilities, intermodal facilities, or intermodal connections?
Well, probably a little bit of both, because I mean, if we're talking about taking parking spaces away, you have to have some place for people to go to access transit, because it's unrealistic to think that there's going to be a bus outside everybody's doorstep.
So having better transfer opportunities and intermodal connections that would be located more convenient to where people need to be. That's a big part of the transfer area analysis that we're doing right now. Let me get back to this side of the room. Mayor Wachowski and then Commissioner Eggers.
These two things sort of go in line, and it's a little bit of kind of what Samantha was talking about, and that is having all our city governments making transportation a priority in their planning. When I sit on our city council, we have development projects that come before us in transit or transportation is sort of a checkbox that happens not in front of us as elected leaders. It's just, okay, we're checking concurrency, we're making sure there's capacity, but it is not a conversation that's had in the development process, or really anything else, because it's like somebody else's job. It's somebody else. Oh, that's the county, or that's PSTA, or that's FDOT. It's not in our wheelhouse. But yet we will build and build and build on Alt 19, which is an upgraded road, and there's no conversation about what do we do about it. So there's a real disconnect, I think, because it's not a responsibility on many roads, not all roads, of the city, or has been made the responsibility. And maybe some cities here talk about it, but we don't. I mean, not enough. And I feel like with 24 cities that we have with the unique situation, that everybody should be making that the front and center conversation when new development comes, or corridor plans are done, or anything else. I can tell you that before I got on PSTA, Dave, maybe you can shed a light. I don't think transit was ever talked about in our city.
I can tell you from my years working as PSTA's consultant back in the 90s, they were getting some site plans to review, but not a lot of them, and so it wasn't a consistent process.
So just having and capacity, making capacity. I think there's a big disconnect between the county level boards and regional boards and our local cities.
Okay. Disconnect. Let's work on that disconnect. Commissioner Eggers.
Well, my comment is really along those same lines, because you asked us today to write some ideas down, some thoughts. We talk a lot, we can write some ideas down. But I really think in the long term, I think leadership has been talked about, but the conversation at the grassroots level with our residents, and when it's not related to a specific project, is really critical. To engage people and talk about the future of their area, talk about the future and the importance of transportation. It needs to be had, and I think the point that the mayor was making about we have 24 beautiful cities in this county, and some really neat unincorporated communities that we have it's right there waiting for to have that conversation with residents. We'll get way out ahead of things, and our residents, they may be thinking about things, but when it comes to putting thoughts together and how that translates to action and to support, to funding support, if you will, we're so far behind, it's not even funny. And to that point, I brought it up before, and I know I've had people take exception with it, but when we did the green light plan, for instance, there was no communication, virtually none with the residents. And I can tell you personally, from knocking on thousands of doors, they didn't know what it was. They didn't know what the term was. And it was their fault or whatever. It doesn't really matter. We're not engaging our residents on just general conversation about the importance of transit to our area in the future. So
you're talking more general conversations, not here's a
specific,
project, but what do you want to see?
And when you have that conversation, you can bring up a lot of this stuff to engage the problem. There's just not enough of that.
Commissioner Kennedy?
I was just going to bring up that the congestion problem as far as the transportation and making it
better waterborne transportation in
Yes.
less than 3 years.
Yes.
Right, you're staking your reputation on it, right?
Well, are we working on it?
We are working on it. We are working on it. We got people in the room working on it. Yes, Commissioner.
Mine was 3 years for water transportation also, with the use of all waterways for public transit. Less than 4 years. But I kind of disagree with the grassroots engagement because I think we've been there, we are there, it's continuing. Because I think for making transit work better, it needs to be less resistance on the leadership and the elected officials, actually, and less of the shelf plans that us planners end up having to do, and more of the actual doing, because it should be the leaders in the government who are the leader. We are the leaders and an example of being the ones who are on the bus or whatever other form of mobile transportation, riding our bicycles to City Hall, or just for the meeting, or just for a meeting with someone, whatever it may be, that we are the model of what it is that we want to see where we are and where we want to be, because that's our job. That's what, so that consistent grassroots engagement, not that it shouldn't happen, but I think on the decisions that we're talking about, we want people to follow and see that and see how great it is, just like continued sustainability, just like solar happening. We want to be those people that are rising to that level, and others say, yeah, I want to do that too, because they've already proven how effective that it is. So I'll ride my bike over to Publix because it literally doesn't know I have a way to get there, and it's nice.
So walk the walk as you talk the talk.
Yeah, I mean, because we could get stuck in the grassroots forever and never. We're not going to please everybody.
Councilmember Kennedy, and then I'll come back to Commissioner Lynch.
From a planning point of view, I think we need to start incorporating autonomous vehicles and such, because that's coming, and we don't necessarily want to be surprised by it.
Okay. Any specific things that you want to make sure we focus on for autonomous vehicles? Is it their availability? Is it certain corridors making them ready, or just making sure it's incorporated in all our planning?
Incorporating in all the plans, and I may have said this at another meeting, but I was at a presentation on autonomous vehicles, and there was a picture that really impressed me in New York City by Columbus Circle, and I think it was 1901, it was all horse and carriages, and in 1913 there was one horse and carriage and it was all vehicles. So it's something that's going to happen quickly, and was talking about a 2040 plan. By 2040, I think they're going to be here.
Yeah, we're at that tipping point in a few years where it's going to go. There is an autonomous vehicle summit that's happening in this region in November, I think is right. Ming, do you have the date for that?
29th, 30th.
November 29th, 30th. Pretty sure. We'll get that date specifically.
Downtown Tampa.
Yeah, downtown Tampa. So I would encourage everybody to go to that. We'll send out notices and make sure it's on your calendars. But that'd be a great opportunity to show that we're really thinking about that and starting to incorporate our planning. Let me go to Mayor Bradbury, since you just had a chance.
When we're talking about our transportation working better, we have to remember, like, our CRA areas or other areas, because of the way that the new roads are designed, are creating CRA areas. US 19, we put in the overpasses. That causes some businesses to go out of business. So we're creating blighted areas by improving transportation. When I was a child growing up, Pinellas County was the most densely populated county in the state of Florida. I'm a mayor now. It still is. And as council members, as business people, we're creating the monster. We're allowing an acre, instead of having 30 homes on it, we're allowing them to put 60 townhomes. We're creating the monsters. We're creating the transportation issues. So when we go to revitalize an area, are we revitalizing traffic, or are we revitalizing our communities.
So I think you raise a good point. What I would argue is that with those 60 homes instead of 30 homes, we're creating a problem because we're expecting them all to drive. And we don't have the other networks in place to give them an option, because 60 homes, that's great for transit service. I mean, that's going to give you really good ridership if the service is there. But we're not able to provide the service because we're not asking those 60 homes to take part in funding the transit system other than through accretion of the property taxes over time, which is a lag. So let me go to Commissioner Welch, who had a comment earlier, and then I'll come back to Commissioner Jones, Councilmember Jones.
Yeah, I just wanted to, and I'm not up for re-election, so I'm not sucking up to my colleagues. But Commissioner Finger and Commissioner Eggers, I want to agree with both of them on different points on the grassroots issue, because I do think it's important. I don't think it was a problem with Greenlight. I was chairman of PSTA that year. I actually had hair back then, Dave. And we talked to everybody. I can't tell you how many forums Brad and I went to, and other commissioners and PSTA staff, as well as partners. I think it was a wrong plan for the wrong time. That's why it lost. But I think grassroots is important, but going back to Commissioner Long, I think folks look to us for leadership. It's hard to get folks out to an MPO meeting, if you've ever gone to those that we've had around. I mean, it's staff and us and nobody else. It's even hard to get folks out during a presidential year until, October or so. Folks actually start dialing in if they're not, a politically tuned in person like most of us are. And I think they expect us to lead on these issues. So I think the leadership is key on this. And when we get to the next card, I have a comment on sustainable funding, which is kind of the elephant in the room. And I think Janice kind of hit on that. So I just wanted to comment on that, since I think we are live streaming this around the county.
We talked about the first mile, last mile. Other communities use park and ride facilities. We have one, I think. Does that make sense?
There's one up on Drew Street I know of. I think there's
one on
maybe a couple more.
Okay.
Yeah. But you're right, we don't have a lot.
And they're used fairly effectively in other communities.
So developing more park and ride, maybe as part of those express premium services. Yes.
This is just kind of a follow-up on what was said before. You go up Route 19 and you go over the overpasses and you look left and right and you see all of the businesses that are out of business. And it seems like, did anybody think that everybody was going to go out of business when they were putting this route up there? Who knows? But the thing is, maybe we can do something with those areas. Maybe when you're talking about putting in new shops or doing a dedicated sort of an area where everything goes just by bikes, and maybe that's an area for that. Maybe you can do something with that to make that area, which is now desolate. Something should be done with that to make it work. And it is, like I said, it's desolate. And those people were just ruined there.
So we had a discussion with the City of Clearwater staff the other day. I mentioned that they're looking for some help as they move their land development standards for their redevelopment activity center on US 19 forward. They think they're going to have a rocky road at the city council level a little bit. And they've got some opposition to what they're trying to do. We're going to have them make a presentation to our board probably in November, maybe in October. Just what are they doing from a land use standpoint to support the objectives of our countywide plan and our MPO long-range plan? I think that might be a good presentation to have to the PSTA board at some point. What are local governments doing to encourage development that's supportive of transit? Because it starts there. And maybe if Clearwater can be that first guinea pig. I know Largo's Medical Arts District is definitely thinking about transit. Brett Burks of our staff is working on a transfer area analysis, which is a land use planning activity to go to each one of the municipalities in Pinellas County to say, how does transit fit into your future for redevelopment? That's what we're talking about for the Alt-19 corridor. So I think you raise a really good point. We haven't talked enough about land use, but that's an equal component to this conversation. Councilmember Cordell.
which will redevelop that area. A lot of times I hear some of our leadership, which I believe, I agree with Michelle and Commissioner Welch, leadership is key here. And some of our leadership will say, especially our very big organization, the Pinellas Building Association, they will go off and say that we're built out. We are not built out. We need to redevelop areas like US 19 from Bel Air north to Countryside. Those areas are rebuilding. The city of Clearwater, as you just mentioned, has come to you with some help for the US 19 corridor to rebuild from Bel Air north using complete street project, using commercial vertical construction ideas. There's some really neat things that are buzzing around. We're going to need everybody's support as leaders to redo into a new age of technology. I encourage everybody to go out on and watch the development of the MPOs in places like Boston, Chicago, and New York. New York actually is using an old rail line, an underground rail line, to develop a park in the old rail line corridor. So
the High Line was the same thing.
the High Line was the same thing, and we actually just hired the group HRA that did the development of the High Line to do our redevelopment of the master plan in downtown Clearwater, which also includes and considers our neighbors, Largo, Safety Harbor, Palmer. And we are looking in a regional way to continue with the great ideas. St. Pete has done some outstanding job with all the development that they're doing. Tampa has been with all the major development and the channel side and the port. You know, I think that it's exciting, we have a lot of changes, but I think we should all leave here with that voice of positive.
Got a few other people who wanted to talk a little bit. The last question. Yes, Councilmember Jones.
To make things work better, we have to consider the connection, the multimodal connections, particularly the transit with the road beds. And I know you're working on access to transit. US 19 projects that did not consider the transit and the accessibility, it's a huge cost to go back and try to fix those.
Anybody else got something burning? Yes, ma'am. Jocelyn, and then I'll go on.
It's kind of just adding to some other things that I've heard, but you know, in our downtown area, in Dunedin, we've redone codes. We are kind of in a parking crisis, and it kind of goes along to the codes. We're spending $3 million on investing in a public-private partnership with a garage because we need more parking. And not once during this thing has transit been a discussion. You know, I've tried to make it about that. Now our residents are fighting back because they don't like the development that's happening. They think it's too much and not enough. We have not enough parking, but then we've got 3-story buildings going up. This is the conversation. Now, I take it a step farther. If we had this great transit system that everybody was using and confident in, I don't think everybody would be so worried about the parking, and we wouldn't be spending this $3 million on some of the stuff we're doing. And so I think every little municipality is going through this growing pain in the same way. And what's going to happen is we're going to end up dialing down our development codes and not being able to get where we want to go, kind of what you're trying to do. And it all comes back to having a great transit system. And so, again, I just want to reiterate, I know it's important to have these regional connections to all our counties. But there's part of me that feels like everybody's attention is on those pretty projects. And we've got to fix what we have right here and right now for the base of everything else to work.
You hit on a real key, which, and I'm glad you put it in those terms, because you put it in financial terms to every local government. And in your view, there's an opportunity cost that every local government's having to pay. There's $3 million City of Dunedin having to spend. There's maybe another $1 million somebody else is having to spend because of the lack of the community coming together and funding something, a little bit of money to fund something larger. And now you're having to take on more that you probably would rather spend that $3 million on something different.
Yes, I would.
You know, so that's an interesting
Very
financial.
much so.
So every decision you don't make Whenever you say no to something, you're saying yes to something else.
Absolutely.
And I think that's an important connection to think about.
Absolutely.
So when you say no to green light, you've said yes to something else. And you're saying yes to parking garages, you're saying yes to more interchanges, you're saying yes to these things, and there's a real clear cost to that.
When we get every 6-month meeting with all elected and all 24 cities, with you and FDOT, to give every one of the elected so they hear the same voice of what those things are. I mean, we are all on these boards, but not all of our colleagues are on
You
these.
feel like you're preaching to the choir?
Of course.
In some ways, you are.
Some of our
Even if
electeds
it's
don't
once
even
a
know.
year, it gets everybody thinking. It's not a
Well,
bad
let's start with
idea.
the first one.
Well, let's talk about that idea. This is, I think, fits under collaboration. Let's talk about that idea of some kind of a summit of some kind. That's what it would be. We need a bigger room. I think we can make something like that happen. I don't know about every year, but let's see what the appetite is, and we can talk about how we engage the broader boards and constituencies. I mean, I think we need to look at all avenues. Commissioner Eggers, you
Yeah, I
want
was
to
just going to, I think things that we're talking about today are not mutually exclusive. I mean, we can work on so many fronts, but at the end of the day, we're talking about a funding source. And so it takes leadership, it takes working regionally, it takes communicating with our cities, but not when we're coming for an ask. I mean, so that's what I was talking about from a connection standpoint with our residents. It's not, as part of the visioning session that Dunedin's going to do in the next 6 months. My guess is there probably isn't a discussion, I may be wrong, but there wasn't in the past a discussion about transportation and transit in our region at all. They're talking about things within Dunedin, so that it doesn't elevate to that. And I just think we need to make sure that we're having a conversation. Not when we're going to ask for a penny for taxes. That's not necessarily the right time because people are pushing back. Our future, our community, I think we got to get people on board with it. So if we're doing all of it at the same time, I think we can really work. And we don't leave people behind on that conversation.
That's really where I think our board wanted to go with the spotlight emphasis areas by saying for US 19, beach access, and the Gateway Mid-County, let's have that sort of conversation without the ask and think about what's our vision for these areas and then come back with a set of projects and a set of ideas saying this is what you told us to do, now we're going to try and advance them, how do we pay for this? But that's a two-part conversation. You're absolutely right. I think you're spot on. Commissioner Gerard, I haven't heard enough from you yet.
I love the idea. Never will. I love the idea of a summit of all the cities that would get actually get this. And, I'm not quite sure about T-BARTA and how do all these things fit together. And, we too much planning, too little communication.
Okay.
Still.
Yep. I knew Commissioner
This is
Lawrence was going
great.
to say something about that. Let me get a Commissioner Murs first, and then I'll come back to you. Cliff.
I think that summits and whatnot are great. It's good to have the picture. But I think we have to, in my opinion, maybe it's my engineering background, maybe just the way I think, but I like to see hard data. And hard data is a way to measure success, especially not only like the crash report. Okay, the crash report took a lot of data, identifies which intersections, which areas are high areas of pain for people, whether it's in safety, whether it's in inconvenience, whether it's in various things. So you can argue with different perceptions, different goals, but data is data, especially if it's properly done. I mean, you can manipulate the data, but if it's properly done, it tells a story of its own. It can help focus direction. And if you're going to be looking for money and for asks, you need to have something to back it up as well. So measuring the success of our collaboration, I think, has a lot to do with, we're ultimately the public is who we deal with. Talk to the public, find out the information as best as we can, and then when we implement something, see how it works. And if it works well, then we know we're in the right direction. Other areas will pop up that we focus towards. We have to obviously have a bigger picture in the direction that we're going. But if we don't continue to measure and evaluate and then see how we're doing, we're always going to be just going in various directions, and no one's going to be happy, and it's just not going to be an efficient way.
It's keeping us on that path for how we track our success, and I completely agree. I love having you on our board.
Maybe some do, maybe some don't.
Somebody who reads the material and really digests it and is looking for those numerical measures of effectiveness.
Right.
We have to have that, absolutely. Commissioner?
Yes, I just wanted to share that unless my memory is totally leaving me, and Commissioner Rice might be able to weigh in, I believe that the Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council is working on putting a transportation summit together, so perhaps you could talk to Sean and we could collaborate and do it all at once instead of everybody doing their own.
No, we're going to have 4 summits. No.
No, but
Yeah,
I'm
we'll
just
actually.
saying.
T-Bar is going to have a summit.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say that.
Very good.
Go ahead.
No, you're correct. I don't know what the time is or where we're at on that, but the RPC has been discussing.
Excellent. How do we measure success for collaboration? We started that conversation. Yes, Mr. Scott.
I think that probably the pinnacle of success would be one transit agency between Pinellas and Hillsborough County with a common funding.
Oh, you're talking crazy.
The common funding mechanism. Okay. All right. We'll make note of that. Mayor Bradbury.
A couple of, when there's a smooth transition from one development to another, and that could be a city, that could be an industrial park, as well as the revitalization of areas that we're targeting, where there's a nice smooth transition. Just thinking when we're doing a development, if we want PSTA to stop by, if we want school buses, and the road service, isn't really all that good as far as, F or C, encourage that developer to have a little inlet for whether it's a PSTA bus or a school bus to pull in off of the road so that they can pick up their passengers, drop off their passengers, and then merge it back into traffic. Then it's not affecting the service level as much. Making sure that when we do revitalize and we do have a target area that we're getting some planning involved. I love the maps that we get that shows the traffic levels. And I have them hanging on the wall in my office, and I'll look from one year to the next to see what the trend is in different areas.
Okay. Commissioner Finger, and then back to Councilmember Rice.
Thank you. I think there's a few ways to look at success of collaboration, and they may not be as data-driven as we were first discussing over here. But I think on a staff level, when we do look at the plans that have been created, to be able to have almost that checklist of we did complete this project, and we completed this one, we completed that one. So that helps, and there's certainly momentum and encouragement. It's the feel good that we're moving ahead with leadership within, whether it's in one of our planning councils or agencies or within the municipalities, that this part of the sidewalk or this part of the trolley, whatever we're working on, is actually moving forward. And I think we should also highlight more of that for our residents. That's where look at us. We did do this, instead of all of a sudden we do drop the big project of let's do all of this. But I think we need to brag a little bit more about some of those that are accomplished. I think that more of that, when we're talking about the collaboration, I'm not sure which corporate leaders we've spoken to, but having some more of those conversations and having those stakeholders, because the gateway area was mentioned with the financial organizations. I've heard talk when we did in the city of Largo, we did those outreach, we do them every year. There was discussion of why can't we have a loop that travels around Largo Mall and to the facilities, the library and such, and then back to, and with having those, that kind of activity center, I would say, when that may be added someday in the future, that's a success because we've collaborated with, again, another planning agency, and maybe it's like a trolley, but it's moving people to where they want to go on a new path, and we wouldn't have been able to do it just on our own by creating a car out there. But the ultimate, I think, for numbers would be When is ridership increased? When have we done our job to get out there and say, hey, you want to be part of this. You want to see look how effective it is. Look how many more days it is. Look at how it's on time. It's running 30 minutes. It does go till midnight. You can shop, work, do whatever. That would be, I think, the ultimate goal is how many people are we serving now?
Large percentage of riders.
Yeah, across the board.
I was going to give both of you the last word. I had Councilmember Rice first, and then Councilmember Kennedy.
Definitely a big fan of the data-driven approach and performance measures, including, setting goals for the number of joint meetings, transit summits, joint presentations, and then tracking the development of our mission and goals that follow out of those meetings, and the alignment of specific goals, whether it's in our source documents and elsewhere, that all comes out of those meetings. But in addition to that data approach, I think there's also something to be said for maybe something that's a little harder to measure, and that's the spirit of collaboration. I think it comes from a strong sense of leadership and how well all of us here as transportation leaders really internalize that commitment to improving our communities and improving our economic vitality. There's such a great story of Denver, and I believe you used Denver as one of our past case examples, but it was then Denver Mayor Hickenlooper had an incredible obstacle to overcome, achieving a regional vision in an area of Colorado that was very balkanized. Kind of similar to how this county split up among many municipalities, and Tampa Bay in general is definitely, balkanized might be too strong a word, but it might be the perfect description. But there's just great stories about how Hickenlooper really built trust with people outside of this area because he drove to meet with them. He went to them. He got out of his comfort zone and met with people and talked with people and really brokered a peace and brokered a level of trust that I'm sure wasn't easy, and it took a lot of hard work. But what it means for me, the lesson I took away from that, as being a St. Pete person, I've got to get out of St. Pete. I've got to go to Clearwater. Yeah. Yes. And Doreen has to take the bus to see me. And someday we take, the 300X to Tampa. But seriously, I think there's a spirit of collaboration, and it's a facet of leadership.
And how we measure success, the first two I think can be data-driven, and it's reduced congestion and travel time. The second would be making our roads safe for all, especially including bicyclists and pedestrians. And the third probably isn't data scenario, but I view transportation as a negative in job recruitment at this point in time for our region, and we need to make transportation a positive for job recruitment.
And I would add to that property value.
Yes.
Because, it's interesting. What I would love to see with transit is the same thing that we see with bike trails. Home values go up the closer you are to a bike trail. There's data-driven evidence that shows it's 2 or 3% above the regular appreciation rate in Pinellas County, or at least it was at one point. I think it's probably even greater now. But does anybody think that that's true of transit today?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It is. It can be. But I'm not sure it is with the service we have today.
Not today.
But it can be.
For instance, is downtown Clearwater. We have a rail line and a train that runs right through downtown Clearwater, and we should be taking an opportunity. Not only does that affect downtown Clearwater, it affects our neighboring cities throughout the whole county.
So we need to get to the point where employers want to go near where a transit line is, and that's an advantage for the employer. We need to get where people want to buy a home near where a transit line is, so they can get to where because they can save money and they can spend that money on a college education or on a home improvement or something else.
All the great comments around the table have really covered what I want to say, but I don't want to leave this without talking about the sustainable funding source. And I think that can be a measure if we can identify and implement a sustainable funding source. Because I think Mayor Wojcicki talked about having a great transit system. And fact is, we can have a great transit system at 0.7305 mils, when 5 communities don't even pay that millage in our county right now. You just can't get to there from here with what we have. And there are a lot of different ways that we can talk about. PSTA, even though I was on vacation, I did watch on streaming video. From Naples, your discussion. Whatever. They had free Wi-Fi at the hotel, so I was watching it. But we're talking about, do we implement, go from 7.305 to 0.75 and bring in another $1 million a year. I was just looking on Gas Buddy. Gas is at $1.89 a gallon. The county has 5 cents gas tax that we have not implemented. There are things that we can do internally that we have not done. So if you want that great transit and transportation system, the issue of funding has to be done at some point. Not to mention that in 5 years, PSTA is in a deficit in our own capital plan to even put buses on the road. So hate to be the downer, but we've got to deal with that issue.
Well, and what that does is it leverages other dollars. When you bring dollars to the table, then you attract dollars from the state, you attract dollars from the feds, and I have a feeling that that's a big part of why we're not as competitive as we have been in going after federal grants, because they know we have not gone to the voters, we have not, well, we've gone, but we haven't been successful in some of those endeavors.
If I could follow up on Ken's comment, I think from a funding point of view, a lot of our residents think of it as Tampa Bay, and one of the scenarios that I think was detrimental to Greenlight was when people looked and said, well, how does it connect over to Hillsborough? And then Hillsborough does their thing, and how does it connect to Pinellas? We really need to get together with Hillsborough, and I mean from a planning point of view, and what we've learned as to when referendums can be successful, I think you need to have a presidential election. So we're probably 4 years away, but 4 years for Pinellas and Hillsborough to sit down, come up with a plan that can be jointly presented to both counties, or if the legislature would let St. Pete and Tampa do it, we could probably be successful in that respect, but we, at this point in time, aren't very optimistic about getting that through the legislature. So I think the foundation of how does Pinellas and Hillsborough go forward with one funding plan and a transportation network that will unite the day.
I was just going to say something. I think you touched on it, Commissioner Welch, about the 5 cities that don't contribute. And you're also talking about collaboration. I think that's step number 1. This has to be a countywide, for our transit agency, we have to have a countywide funding source. And that's about collaboration, that's about showing the importance. That alone, that funding alone from those 5 cities can do a ton for our local.
Yeah. I think it's like $3 million.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask Brad, just put you off the spot a little bit. You've been following this conversation. Is there anything that you haven't heard that you would add to this list of things you want to see as a measure of success or an outcome in the next 3 years that you'd like to see happen? Something that hasn't been said, or would you like to just reiterate?
Well, I'm very grateful to my PSTA board members because you've maybe been listening a little bit because all my things were all mentioned by PSTA board members. So thank you very much for that. On the last one, I heard you say when we sit here a year from now in July 2017 and whether we measure success of just a 1-year horizon, I mean the funding sources and things like that are maybe a little bit more than 1 year. My thought was exactly, maybe it's a little too wonkish, but it's what we're doing today. We're starting today and hopefully getting done. That within a year's time, the Ford Pinellas board would have adopted a top 10 list of transportation projects that had transit, my goal would be 3, but any transit in the top 10, trails in the top 10, and roads, and then FDOT in January, we would be able to announce next July that FDOT had funded many or most of those in their work program. That's how it's supposed to work. The local decision makers say what's important for their county, and then the DOT says, okay, this is how we can make it happen. And that hasn't happened so well in the past, and that would be, I think, a great outcome in 1 year.
It's a shared staff outcome.
Brad, can you tell everybody the 5 cities that don't contribute to PSTA?
Yes, it's St. Pete Beach and Treasure Island are the big 2, and then Kenneth City, Bel Air Beach, and Bel Air Shores. So is that 5? It's the Tierra Verde Fire District, part of
So it's really
Pinellas
6
County.
with Tennessee added.
Well, it's 5 plus a portion of unincorporated Pinellas County. Yeah.
So we're right at 12. I'll ask the 2 chairs if there are any summation remarks. Councilmember Rice, any final thoughts that you want to have?
Thank you for giving me that opportunity. I really think we've heard some incredible comments today that reflect a lot of insight and experience from people on the NPO and PSTA. One of the takeaways I got, just to emphasize what Brad just said, is that we need, I think first and foremost from the PSTA perspective, I think there's a shared sense that we've just got to nail it on bus service and figure out how we can provide the best service, expand hours, and do so in a sustainable way. And on the other hand, I think we definitely see where transportation, it's not just getting from one point to another, it's an organism, and there's a lot of complexity, and there's different ways of looking about how we move people around, and I think we're getting at that, and I'm really thrilled at how we're approaching this new prioritization process. I think it's a good marker of from where we started like a year or more ago. This is exactly where we want to be moving forward, working together.
And I also want to thank everybody for attending and being involved. I think the biggest thing that's coming down the line that just came to us very recently is the federal regulation that is basically going to require MPOs to consolidate. And that's going to be the Tampa Bay TMA, Transit Management Area, of Hillsborough, Pinellas, and Pasco. But if we wind up having, and we can speak a little bit more on this from the regulations, but that seems to be coming down the line. So we're going to wind up within our probably 3 to 5 year time period having some type of consolidated MPO for the 3 counties. And we need to start thinking about how we do that from citizen involvement groups and our bike ped groups, and how we maintain local information flowing, but into that larger MPO, because that's where the federal government and FDOT is really pushing us. So that's the thing that I think is going to be very, very different in transportation in the next 3 to 5 years.
Maybe. Let me just clarify.
Yeah.
That there's an option A and an option B. Option A is, according to the proposed rule, is that we would consolidate and become one MPO within one metropolitan planning area, which is portions of Pasco, Hillsborough, and Pinellas County. It's an urbanized area that's expected to be urbanized over the next 20 years. So it'll expand. That's option A. Option B is we make a convincing argument that we retain 3 MPOs, but develop one set of planning products, one long-range plan, one set of performance measures and targets, which we talked a lot about today, and one prioritization process for Hillsborough, Pinellas, and Pasco. And I've committed, and I think the staff and my counterparts are committed to doing that regardless of the proposed rule, and make that happen now. and see how we work within the TMA leadership group framework. And if we see that is better than what we've been doing, and if we see that there's still political momentum to create one MPO, let's see how the census shakes out and do it as part of the census in 2020 with reapportionment. But that will mean changes in seats for, do we have a beach representative on the board? We may or may not. Will we continue to have the cities represented the way they are in Pinellas? What does that mean for our land use transportation linkages that you've created with Forward Pinellas? Because that would be a different animal. It would take the MPO back out of that unified land use and create it something else. So those are things to think about. But we do have a path A and a path B, so it's not a hard requirement. But the way it's set up in the proposed rule, it's certainly skewed that way. And unless that rule changes, it's going to be a hard argument to maintain separate MPOs. So just we can have that conversation more as we go forward, but it's an important thing about collaboration.
Do you want to add what we did at the summit at Balthazar as it relates to the letter from the MPOAC?
The MPOAC passed a resolution to draft a strongly worded letter opposing the proposed rule, basically because Florida is a national leader in regional coordination and collaboration compared to many other states, and to say that it's working now. And I think the big thing was that the way the rule leaves it is if the governor and the MPO area doesn't agree, then it defaults to the governor and the U.S. DOT to actually make the ultimate decision. So it can be forced on us even if we don't agree. So there's some language in there that we're trying to maybe tweak. Yeah.
As it relates to the long-range transportation plan and our transportation infrastructure projects in particular.
Yeah.
So all of us collectively, there was how many MPOs?
27 MPOs in Florida.
Were at that meeting and all voted to make sure that we have a letter drafted at that level.
Right. And we're drafting our own letter. In fact, we're meeting on that next week, August 8th. So the board authorized the chairman and I to put together a letter that we'll share with you on those comments. Please,
Just one quick question. Are we going to have the opportunity, you talked about the proposed priority list and having 10 items to advance and a transit item and all of that. And I think to your point, Brad, are we going to have a discussion as the MPO or the Forward Pinellas about that and about how we, I don't know, what I'm concerned about is that we get everybody's thoughts as to, you know, how are we going to micromanage the PSTA operation in deciding whether or not they get on our list? Because there's so many things. The question becomes oftentimes at PSTA, are we doing everything we can to then go asking for funds out elsewhere? And I would say we are because we put together a strategic plan, we're having good dialogue. But there's a lot of people who could go into our system and say, well, you don't have a max millage. You don't have the right bus mix that could be cheaper. You don't have, there's a lot of things you could get in there. And I just want to make sure that as we move forward for that next year and trying to come up with some transit things that we as a board have that kind of communication. So are we going to have an opportunity to have that dialogue? We're not having it today, obviously, but are we going to have that chance? I just think it's important. Otherwise, it's just there's a lot of things that we don't talk about. And I just want to make sure that we as a board of PSTA are thinking the way we should be thinking and without that worry that MPO is going to be saying, oh no, because you didn't do A, B, C. And that includes making sure that the other cities are on board, you know, that aren't on board, or the, you know, the bus mix or the grant. Are you doing enough grant requesting? Is there enough discussion going on with, you know, Hillsborough County and Hart? So I think we can get into a whole bunch of things, but I just want to make sure that we don't exclude PSTA from the funding just because they don't check the boxes.
Well, Commissioner, I want to add to that too. You as a PSTA then start to become a multimodal organization, not just bus, but also just transit agency.
Whatever it is.
Will be a multimodal. This is an amazing facility, and this could be a facility for all modes of transit. Just keep that in mind as far as regional and.
Well, I know, and again, I'm just thinking about that next year, and as far as to Brad's point, and again, I know there's a lot of things in the works, but I just want to make sure we have that conversation at some point.
Yeah. You have one more meeting before you have to transmit your priorities to DOT, and that's the second meeting. So we can either have that as part of the September meeting, but what I suspect is that that's a longer conversation and probably needs to be had over the next year. But maybe what we do is we see how this prioritization goes this first year, see how the board wants to do it, and then if there's a continued dialogue, continued discussion about what conditions the Port Mills board would like to see happen before it agrees to prioritize more than one or two projects. You know, that could
Just
be
a conversation, I
time.
think.
Yeah, that's probably bigger than the September board meeting, especially given the other cities as part of PSTA.
I understand, I did.
And just a quick reminder of how PSTA fares in our benchmark studies, where we are compared in significant categories to peer agencies, which provides a way to look at how we're doing, and we shape up pretty well.
Well, I want to thank you all very much for your time this morning. It was a great conversation. We're going to summarize your comments, and we will provide a summary of the in our September board report. And I need your sheets, and I would please remember to initial them if you have them, but just pass them to your left, and we'll get them around the room, and I'll pick them up over here. So pass your little worksheets around. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Hey, Mayor. I didn't know South Georgia was in the house. Good to see you. It's good. Yeah, I just got back last night. Where were you? We did a Disney cruise, and then we went down to Naples. What island? Bahamas, and then they're Castaway. Yeah.
Do you guys have a good weekend?
All right,
Private island. Yeah. Kind of